Good morning and welcome in. It is the Sports Junkies on Memorial Day. The guys have the day off today. They'll be back in tomorrow. Look like they had a heck of a time out in Dewey Beach. Sitting in for them today, Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober with you here on Memorial Day. Strobes, it's the Tobes and Strobe show on 106.7 The Fan. How about it?
Can you believe they made this a real thing? It started out as a bit at first when we were at the Sweet 16/Elite 8 at Capital One Arena. And somebody made like a graphic for us saying they should make this into a real thing, like tagged CK or something, and they actually made it a real thing.
How about it? Unfunny Ben hosting for the Sports Junkies. How about that?
Hey now.
Are you going to embrace that today?
No.
Just full unfunny Ben Strober just rolling today?
No, because it's not true. It was the worst bit in radio history.
Well, I think there have been some worse ones. All right, we got plenty to talk about today. Glenn Consor going to join us coming up at 9 o'clock. I want to get his thoughts on what the Wizards are going to do this offseason. We'll talk a little more Wiz throughout the show as well. Anthony Davis, Trey Young, what are they going to do with their draft pick? Talk about the Commanders as well. Terry McLaurin. David Blau saying they're going to try to get him 10 targets a game. What does that look like? Also want to talk about the Washington Nationals and what they were able to do, taking 2 of 3 in Atlanta. We're on parade watch, Strobes. The Grant and Danny Show could be having a parade tomorrow if they get a win today against the Guardians.
Again, we're in the same spot that we've been a few times. At first, it was they could never get back to 500. Now they have no problem doing that. It's they can't get over now.
Yeah.
Can we finally change it against the Guardians today?
I think so. So I don't know if it's necessarily today. I think they'll find a way to take 2 of 3 in Cleveland, though, and we'll have that parade at some point for the Grant and Danny program.
And you're in full uniform for you.
Full uni. And
I'm
ready to rock.
Wait.
I'm ready to rock.
I can't wait for it.
Eye black, high socks. We got everything ready to roll. How much of the playoffs did you watch yesterday in the NBA? Western Conference Finals, Spurs tie it up with the Thunder. Wemby looks like he's taken over as like the next guy in this league.
I watched most of I'd say the first 3 quarters, because obviously we had to get to bed pretty early for this show. I was doing this
speak for yourself.
I know. But the Wemby takeover has been really exciting, really compelling to watch, because I think the biggest question that we've had over the last couple of years as LeBron has gotten older, as Steph Curry has neared his retirement probably in the next couple of years, who's the next face of this league? And I think the easy answer for a couple of years before Wemby came around was you're looking at Anthony Edwards right now, what he's done with Minnesota for the last couple of seasons. But then you have a 7'5" guy that's a better ball handler than probably 80% of the NBA right now, who's just come in and completely taken over the league. And this loading dynasty that we've seen here with OKC that stockpiled future assets, that just has unbelievable talent, guys that come off their bench that could probably be second or first options on other teams right now. This guy, if he takes down what is supposed to be this dynasty in OKC that's loading, then you're looking at this like insane rivalry that's going to brew here over the next 5 to 7 years, with Wemby being the face of that and him and SGA going toe for toe every single year, because he took not winning the MVP personally.
Yeah, I love watching this. I mean, he's such a unicorn in the game. I mean, to call people generational, we do it all too often, and so it kind of takes away from the meaning. Victor Wembanyama is generational. I mean, he's someone that I don't know that we've seen many of the likes in NBA history in terms of the way that he's able to play the game at his size. I think the only guy, and he doesn't get cast in this because he classifies himself as 6'11", even though he's actually 7 foot, is Kevin Durant.
Right.
Because of the ability to move, do everything at all 3 levels, be able to score the basketball the way that he does at that size. They're so unique. So if I think we talk about KD a little bit differently if we, actually classified him as a 7-footer. But regardless, it's not a lot of guys like Victor Wembanyama, because as much as Kevin Durant is 7 foot and incredible on the offensive end, he's not nearly the defender that Victor Wembanyama is, and his ability to affect every single shot that happens inside the paint when he's in the game. And even if he doesn't block it, he had 3 blocks last night, but just the impact that he has by being on the floor, it's incredible to watch. And I think he is the next guy to take over the mantle for being the face of the league, because it's not like SGA hasn't already had his shot to do so, and I don't feel like he's taken it.
It's just different for a guy in SGA's shoes. And I know there's the rap about him right now because of the flopping he's done all over the place the whole postseason. It's hard to watch.
It is.
At times, and I will admit that. But Wembanyama, 33 and 11 of 22 yesterday, 3 of 7 from downtown as well. The guy does everything on the floor, but he does it at the highest level on both ends of the floor. And then he knocks one down from half court. And you're like, are you serious, dude? If you thought this dude couldn't get more exciting, he knocks one down to end the half from half court. It doesn't get any better than Victor Wembanyama right now in terms of two-way impact. Because as you said, look at his block total for yesterday. So he had 3 yesterday. It's a little bit short. That's only a fourth of the 12 he had in one game earlier in the postseason. But he affects 12 to 15 shots a game at minimum. You have to become a jump shooting team in order to beat San Antonio. And OKC's not the best 3-point shooting team that was in this postseason. Like, they like to play a downhill game. They like to get a lot in the mid-range, obviously, with SGA. But if you're not getting like some of the production that you get from the outside, typically from Lou Dort, who only took 1 3 yesterday, or some of the other guys, OKC only had 6 threes yesterday. You need more than that to beat Wemby.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to see what he's able to do. And I think on the Thunder side of things, it's one of those things you split. You got now a best-of-3 series with the home court advantage. I think you'll take your shot with that. But I loved SGA when he was traded from LA to OKC. I can't stand watching him now. It's such a shame because he's such a talented player.
He doesn't need to do all this.
He's really good, but I can't stand watching the foul baiting. And that's what's made the NBA so tough to watch now. And it's frustrating because when the NBA is at its best, it's so good. It's so good. But then there's so often now where it's hard to watch because you've got guys flopping all over the place. And I sound like I'm so old when I say all of this. But the reality is, even from the games that we were watching when we knew it was going to be Warriors-Cavs in the finals, it's a totally different NBA now.
It was so good, even though there was no parity. We've had a different champion 8 years in a row, but the regular season product is what has driven down, I think, the view of basketball as a whole. Because as somebody now that covers the NBA, I really understand the pitfalls that we've seen with regular season basketball, the waning effort from players, the load management, the injuries that occur all the time. The postseason reminds you, like, okay, this is the highest level of sport that you can find. The NBA playoffs is really good, and people turn up the intensity a notch. It's very important for what the game is trying to do, obviously. And you see the low point totals in the postseason compared to the regular season. 82 points is the second lowest point total in the entire postseason for OKC. But like, this is legitimately what we should see in terms of final scores throughout an entire season. That's what it was like for a long time. But the NBA is about scoring right now. They call a lot more fouls in the regular season. OKC is simply doing what they've done all year long because the officials have allowed for it to happen. Maybe they call less of it here in the postseason. But what I don't understand about the NBA, if there's something that is unenjoyable to watch about the product, they don't ever do enough to make things better. The NFL, whenever something is not enjoyable about the product to watch, they do something. 20-yard extra point was too easy. Nobody cared about it. They changed the rules, moved the extra point back to 33 yards. The kickoff, too many touchbacks. They moved it back, and they have the new dynamic kickoff rule. The NFL is the king of doing things to make the product better for what more people want to see. The NBA doesn't necessarily do that.
Well, I mean, I was going to comment baseball.
Yeah.
Baseball's done a fantastic job of this.
Right.
And some of the stuff, I'm a traditionalist, so some of the stuff I'm not as big a fan of still. But baseball for years was criticized for various things. And to his credit, Rob Manfred was proactive and said, let's put in a pitch clock, let's ban the shift, let's do some different things. And all of a sudden, baseball's as compelling as it's been in the last 15 years now, watching it. And it's so much fun to see how quickly the game has started to grow again versus the NBA's on the decline. I mean, it used to be that NBA playoff basketball, especially when you got to the conference finals, you moved your calendar around to watch it. Like, you knew that the game was coming on at 7:30, you made sure you were doing nothing that night by 7 o'clock. It's not that way anymore.
Right. And we had years in this town when the Wizards were good with Wall and Brad, and the Capitals were doing what they had been doing for such a long time, where every single night in the spring, April through mid-May, you had a game to watch every night. And it was exciting, it was compelling, and it was a thrill every single time you could put on the TV. And, you know, obviously this year Caps missed the playoffs. Wizards were doing what they were doing, and now they have the number one overall picks.
What were they doing?
Something. They were doing something. Something that's going to benefit them for a very long time, though.
Someone tell Chris Russell.
We should get Chris Russell.
Yeah, they may or may not have tanked. It's okay.
It's okay.
It worked out.
I mean, you got a second overall pick in 2024, now first overall pick this year. This has a chance to change how you and I feel about NBA basketball in this town, because hopefully our team is playing at this point for years to come. And I don't know with what OKC is doing and what Victor Wembanyama is doing, like who will dethrone those guys. But thank God they're in the Western Conference. It's a little bit, you got to worry about getting to the finals before you have to really worry about beating those guys, which is a good thing right now. But there's about to be a turn in this town, how people feel about hoops, I think, especially given on what they do at number one overall. We'll talk more about that throughout the show. But it is interesting that it kind of is like a waning thing. And because Wizards basketball hasn't been very good for quite some time, it's made it a little bit more difficult for people in this area to get into the NBA playoffs just because their team's not a part of it. But I think this year has kind of rejuvenated the way people have felt about the product, just because you have a new young face of the league coming in here. But they need to do something about the flopping.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have to try to address something with it, because it's funny. You always joke, when we're working on Grant and Danny, you're always joking that I've been so many different spots, been so many different places.
Because you have.
I have been a lot of places. I've been privileged to do so. But, I can vividly recall, I have like a picture on my camera roll, and it's a picture of a pizza, which means absolutely nothing to anybody.
What?
But when I think of this pizza, it's in Cairns, Australia, and what I remember about it is watching the Western Conference Finals when it was Golden State and Houston. That's my favorite series of playoff basketball probably in the last decade.
The 27 missed threes?
Might have been that one. I think so, yeah. If Chris Paul doesn't get hurt, I think Houston wins that series. But are we talking about any of these series over the last 5 years like that, where it's memorable? You might remember a specific performance, but I don't feel like I see that anymore. It used to be something, it was must-see television when you got to NBA playoff basketball. And I understand all of the regular season stuff, but the regular season has nothing to do with what's going on right now, and I still am not that intrigued by this.
Right. I think individual performances are super important for the game and the way you remember series, the way you remember games, because one of the most memorable series or games I can imagine in the last couple of years was actually an irrelevant franchise in Sacramento and Golden State when they met in the playoffs, I think 3 years ago during the Light the Beam year. Curry dropped 50 in Game 7 of that series, and it was just one of those vintage Steph Curry performances coming off winning the title the year before that. And that's kind of what sticks out to me. OKC and Denver went to 7 games last year, and then that was the closest anybody played with OKC outside of the finals, and then Halliburton goes down. I'd say the Eastern Conference Finals last year, just because of the run that Halliburton was on, it's the individual stuff that matters so much in NBA basketball. So when you have a new face like Wemby, it's going to be really impactful, really good, positive thing for the game.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's one of those things that, I think Adam Silver spends so much of his time. And by the way, I think the narrative around Silver has changed drastically. You talk about Silver 4 or 5 years ago, we're talking about him as maybe the best commissioner in all sports, even though I've never been a fan.
Right.
Now people are turning on Adam Silver, which, I don't think he's really been that great for the NBA product. Maybe in terms of revenue, which is obviously what a big part of it is. But at the same point, the salary cap's going down next year. I mean, that's alarming. In every other sport, we're talking about it exploding. Even in hockey, we're talking about exploding. The NFL's jumped over $100 million over the last couple of years in salary cap. In the NBA, it's not like it's dropping drastically, but it should be going up, and it's not.
And now you have this whole first apron, second apron, mid-level taxpayer exemption.
I don't understand any of the NBA salary cap.
It's really hard to understand. And yesterday, you see, we'll probably talk about this at some point, somebody trying to sway that the Wizards are going to be a wild card in LeBron James sweepstakes.
That ain't happening.
Exactly. But the one thing I thought about, okay, LeBron's going to go back to Cleveland. That's how I've looked at it. That's the only destination I feel like makes sense for him. However, Cleveland's in the second apron right now. And the way I was looking at it, I was like, Rich Paul, LeBron, AD connection. Are they a package deal? Is this going to be something that brews here over the offseason if LeBron does indeed sign back with his hometown in Cleveland? I'm like, could we get Jared Allen from the Cavs and a couple assets? And I looked it up. The Cavs have basically no assets, and they're in the second apron, so you can't aggregate salaries in order to make this. A lot would have to happen for this deal to even make sense. And I'm not in a rush to get Anthony Davis out of town. I do want to see it through with Trey Young, the number 1 overall pick, and all the other young guys that we have here in D.C. But it's just so weird that you have teams that are first apron teams, you have second apron teams that basically can't do anything at this point, and then you have 4 teams that are that have cap space. That's how the NBA works now.
Yeah, you got to be a rocket scientist to understand how the NBA salary cap works.
You have to trade. That's what Michael Winger said with Ryan Russillo. You take $85 million of cap space into the offseason, you might have nothing to do with it. There might not be anybody worth getting in free agency.
Yeah.
There'll be a couple guys, but you're not getting any stars now.
And NBA has a salary floor, so you're going to have to spend that money somewhere.
Exactly.
It's not like you can just sit there and, in the NFL, you have to hit it every couple of years so you can carry some of that over. Not in the NBA. Like, every year you got to hit that mark. So I think that is a good point. And I just think it's funny that Adam Silver spends so much of his time trying to fix the tanking issue, which I understand that is a problem in the NBA. But the idea that he has to fix that and he's not doing something to address the gameplay of constant flopping, everybody
terrible
shooting
defense,
a million threes, not playing defense, like all those sorts of things that we talk about, there's a reason that everybody brings them up. It's because even though hoop heads probably get frustrated, like, well, it's not like the casual fans are the ones that you have to keep. And if the casual fans are turning it off, you've got to do something to change that. I don't know exactly what that is, but you got to do something.
I would shorten this. I know you and I can argue about this, about shortening the season. I think shortening the season would be great. I know you're not into it because the traditionalist you is saying these guys used to play 82 games all the time. Like, it's just soft now. I don't know if it's because of the way we bring up athletes these days and the AAU circuits and the amount of wear and tear people put on their bodies at a young age and now playing back-to-backs as part of that. I would get rid of back-to-backs. I think they're totally worthless. Like, the Wizards doing a back-to-back with the Indiana Pacers at home this year was the worst thing I've ever seen. And I know you were at one of those games.
That was one of the worst.
It was bad.
Watching
two tanking teams.
You want to watch more Taylor and Peter is what I remember you saying.
Don't get me started on number 4 in Indiana.
No, but the reason I wouldn't want to shorten the season is, like you mentioned, I've seen guys play 82 games all throughout history. I didn't see Jordan play, but I know Jordan played 82 games. Kobe played 82 games. LeBron throughout his career has played 82 games. I don't think that suddenly athletes in 2026 aren't able to play. Now, I do understand that there are changes to the game. The pace of play is much faster now than it's ever been in basketball, so I get that there is some of that. But that's why you have to go a little deeper in the rotation. That's why you have to have depth. That's why you have to do some different things. And that's why I don't mind as much if a guy has to sit out a game or two. Like, it's going to happen. But I just think that there are so many things that need to be changed with the NBA game. And unfortunately, I wish there was a simple fix. Like,
right.
For baseball, it was like, all right, speed things up. Let's put the pitch clock in. Let's ban the shift. And, Manfred, to his credit, did that. But you and I could have figured out, okay, we probably got to do something here. With the NBA, what are you going to do? You going to make them play defense harder? How? How do you implement that?
And I feel like the NBA's way of doing this, getting stars to play more, was the 65-game rule.
Which I'm for, by the way.
I agree with it. I think it's a little bit flawed. I think minutes played should account for it as well, because playing 64 games but having 2,300 minutes is very different than playing 65 and under 2,000. I think 2,000 minutes should be the minimum threshold for it. And Luka almost didn't qualify because he had to go back to his home country for the birth of his child. But he had over 2,300 minutes played.
Yeah.
You saw the first, second, and third team came out yesterday, and I don't have any issues with the list. SGA, Jokic, Wembanyama, Doncic, Cade Cunningham take first team. I think that's a deserving first team at that. Brown, Leonard, Durant, Brunson, Donovan Mitchell on the second team. Then third, Tyrese Maxey, Jamal Murray, Jalen Johnson. Jalen Duren got on the third team, and then Chet Holmgren. It's interesting that Jalen Duren is on the third team because now Detroit has a really, really impossible decision to make about Duren.
Yeah.
Because they were worried about having to pay him what they thought he was going to get if he didn't make the All-NBA team. Now they're going to have to supermax him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
I don't know if they're going to do it.
So real quick, we'll want to get into the Nationals here in our next segment, but real quick, the all-rookie teams were put out this past week. Did you find it a little bit surprising that there wasn't a Wizard? I'm Trey Young. I know that Wizards fans are going to be slighted by this, so if you just look at the teams, first team is Cooper Flagg, Con Knippel, VJ Edgecombe, Dylan Harper, Cedric Coward, and the second team, Ace Bailey, Jeremiah Fears, Colin Murray-Boyles, Maxime Reynaud, and Derek Queen. I don't know that I feel like a Wizard and maybe Will Riley deserved to be. I don't know if I feel like either one deserved. Not to say that I don't feel good about their futures, but I saw a lot of people getting frustrated by no Wizards being on there. I feel good about Trey Johnson and Will Riley's futures, but
I do too.
I don't take either of those guys over really anybody on these lists.
I have no issue with the list whatsoever. It's basically a minutes played list anyway. Trey Johnson only played in 60 games. Will Riley played in a bit more, but he didn't really play significant minutes until after the All-Star break. Those guys were both just kind of casualties of the tank that the Wizards were on. I think Johnson especially, he didn't even play the fourth quarter of a game after he left with an ankle injury on John Wall night where Ryan Rollins stepped on his foot, sprained his ankle. He was kind of in and out of the lineup the entire rest of the season. If you look at the month of December and January, Trey Johnson was really going. Shooting over 40% from three in those 2 months. Looked like the guy that they took 6 overall was going to be as advertised. I think as he kind of battled the injury throughout the season, especially down the stretch there, in and out of the lineup, as I mentioned, he didn't look as great. I think he struggled a little bit defensively the way a rookie would, especially at his size. I'm not worried about those two. I think they will have prominent roles in this team going forward, and even like well on in the future when this team is hopefully competing, Trey Johnson could have a very valuable role for this team, whether it's off the bench or in the starting line. He has an elite skill set shooting the basketball. I'm not worried about them not being on the list. It's just a list.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything for their future.
Yeah, neither one was particularly close on getting on the list. So Colin Murray Boyles had 66 points to get on to the second team. He was the last guy on the second team. The next closest for the Wizards would have been Trey Johnson at 19. Kalkbrenner had 43 for Charlotte. Will Riley had 4. So there was not really much of a chance that either one of those guys was going to get on the list. But I think you feel pretty good about your future. And by the way, I mean, it's kind of crazy to me even that Will Riley's not higher. I almost would have Will Riley higher than Trey Johnson.
Yeah, it's kind of a recency effect, though, because he was playing so many significant minutes in the month of March and April, had back-to-back 30-point games, and averaged, I think it was 15 after the All-Star break, and it was good. You got to give him credit for what he was doing on the floor, and I know a lot of people don't like to value hoops in March because of all the tanking that's going on, and the product is just dwindles down, except for these teams that are really fighting for spots in the playoffs. But you have to give Riley credit. He had a very impressive final quarter of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care who he's playing against. It's not like he's playing in the G League. He's playing in the NBA.
Right.
It matters.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the Washington Nationals. They took 2 of 3 from Atlanta on the road. That's only the second time that the Braves have lost a series all year long. The Braves only scoring 6 runs total in the series. And how about this? Nationals pitching came in giving up the most runs in all of baseball. And like I said, only gave up to 6 runs. The Nationals offense wasn't really going in this one. Only scored 4 runs over the last 2 games, but enough to win back-to-back games, and now they head to Cleveland with a chance to get above 500. Let's talk about the Nats next. If you want to hop in at any point during the show, feel free, 800-636-1067. It's Tobes and Strobes in for the Junks on Memorial Day. Tobes and Strobes in for the Junks today on Memorial Day. Just a couple of LFLs doing their thing here on Memorial Day morning.
Feels so good. Happy Memorial Day, first of all.
Yeah, a little 6:30 Ella Langley. Can't beat it. Max on the ones and twos behind the glass doing a heck of a job this morning.
We got 2 gingers for this show today.
Yeah, we went deep down the board to make sure that we could find people for this morning.
Finally, some representation.
And we do the morning because the sun's not out yet.
Yeah. 800-636-1067 if you want to hop in. How about the Nationals? I mean, first of all, real quick, before we get into breaking down the series, Atlanta people can never complain, or at least for a couple of years, cannot complain about Nationals Park and the way they handle rain delays and game times. Shut up about that, because what the heck was yesterday?
When I was watching and I saw them take the tarp out, they got it over like the main part of the infield, the grass, and then I see the first baseline not getting. I'm like, what are we doing? And everyone's just kind of standing there getting. I'm like, is this game over? Are the Nats about to get a W in 7 innings here, or not even 7 innings because they can't get the tarp on? They waited way too long. First of all, to make this decision, it was pouring for a while, and then they finally decided to call it. I think after the bottom of the 6th, that's when they should have.
Yes.
Gone ahead and got the tarp on the. Why did they bother starting a Dalen Lyle at bat and having 2 pitches in? The umpire's like, that's it. That's it, everybody.
I do not get what the heck they were thinking. Now, I'm thankful that they could at least keep going a little bit so that Foster Griffin could get through 6. Because I hated what happened the day before, where you go through an inning, and this is where I don't know how you plan for this. If you're Blake Butera, that would have been a nice series or game for an opener when you could have just used a bullpen guy and then had your starter come out afterwards. But regardless, Jake Irvin the day before was able to go 5 innings of hitless ball, and that was nice to see. Problem is, Jake Irvin now goes on the shelf with a shoulder strain, so at least Foster Griffin was able to give you 6 innings, but holy smokes. Like, why in the world was the game at 4 o'clock in the first place?
That was my initial question. Why are they playing at 4 on Memorial Weekend on Sunday?
Move it up to 1 o'clock if you have to, understanding the weather.
Was there weather before that? Because the game got pushed back to 4:30.
From the people that were on the scene, it sounds like they could have played that game. Maybe there would have been a little bit of a little rain, but not the significant rain that we saw late in the game that caused it to get delayed. Late in that ball game. There was obviously a rain delay to start. I mean, just a joke. And what makes no sense is June the 7th, they're home against Pittsburgh, 1:35. June 21st, they're home, 1 o'clock against Milwaukee. July 5th, home NBC game at 12:30. So it looks like the rest of their Sunday home games in the first half are 1 o'clock or earlier. Why in the world was this one at 4 o'clock? Especially when you knew weather was coming. I understand, whatever, schedule it whenever you want at the beginning of the year. We've already seen multiple teams move their start times up if they see weather coming down the line. So I don't know what the heck that was, but how about the Nationals last 2 days winning 2-0, 2-1? Impressive to see what this team has been able to do. This has been a fun team to watch. I was telling Paul Taboni this. The worst thing that you can be in professional sports is bad and boring. And fortunately for this team, they're neither.
They took it personal. They made it their mission. But I want to point out that this season so far, through 52 games, has completely changed the way I feel about the franchise. I was not excited at all about this upcoming national season, another offseason where they didn't really do much, didn't address the first base position. I'm like, are we going into a season where Luis Garcia Jr. is our first baseman and I'm supposed to be excited about this baseball team?
The answer was yes, by the way.
Our addition to the pitching staff, Foster Griffin, who's been probably their best guy. Talk about a bounce back for him yesterday after his last couple of starts weren't so great. A quality start for Griffin yesterday. And this pitching staff has seemingly had an encouraging turning of the corner a little bit here. And I'm not saying they're going to be great the rest of the year, but you can't ignore what this baseball team did against the second best offense in baseball. Oh, and who's the first best offense, Toby? You want to tell me?
Yeah, that'd be the Nationals.
Right. The second best offense in the Braves, though, who had been dominating baseball, best team in baseball, the hardest offense to get out in baseball other than the Nats right now. And the Nats hold them to just 1 run over the final 2 games of the season. It should have been a sweep. They should have swept. And boy, it would have been fun. We could have had a parade today, I guess, even though everyone's off from Memorial Day. Could have had the parade here instead with Grand Danny. But you got to love what this Nationals team is doing, the way they've embraced analytics and data and doing all the things that we didn't think about in years past. Maybe we thought about it, but we didn't understand what was really possible when you made this into a reality, doing what teams who don't spend a lot of money do, like the Rays. This year's been a good year for baseball teams that haven't spent a lot of money.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that this offense, now it's 2 months of baseball. A lot of people look at Memorial Day as the first times you can kind of look at the standings and kind of get an idea of where teams are at. Now that you have a sample size, because of the fact that baseball is a long sport, it's a sport that's played over 162, so it's trends and you need sample size. 54 games now. The Nationals are 27-27. That's a third of the way through the season. That's enough of a sample size. And by the way, they're at the top of the sport in runs scored. I mean, it's not something where you can look at it and say, oh, it's a fluke. They got hot for a week. It's a third of the way through the year. It's not a small sample size anymore, and they lead all of Major League Baseball by 6 runs. That's the Atlanta Braves right behind them. And then they lead the Dodgers by 14 runs.
Right.
So
the NL All-Star team, by the way.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible to see what they've been able to do. And this seems like something that they can sustain because of the way that they go about constructing their lineups, putting guys in good spots to succeed, making sure that they're facing favorable matchups. And it's not like you've seen a bunch of guys play above what they're capable of, I would say. Like, I would say the only guys that you feel like maybe would come back down to earth, quote unquote, would be CJ and James Wood. And both of those guys are star players.
They're stars.
So I don't see it something where, oh, yeah, they're going to come back down to earth and be a 700 OPS. No, I think they're 800, 900 OPS kind of guys, especially with the CJ that now has a better approach. And so looking up and down the lineup, you're like, okay, they're getting production from Meade and Garcia. Well, I think part of the reason you're getting production there is you're making sure you put them in the correct spot where they're facing guys that they're going to do well against. Kabert is finally coming around as the catcher position, and that's something that you could have looked at through the first month and a half of the season and gone, well, they're going to get more out of their catcher at some point because that position was abysmal. Nasim Nunez is still in the lineup. I wish he would have been able to turn that double play to end the game yesterday, but maybe at some point they make a move to get more hitting there.
Right.
That's another spot where you could add. Jacob Young, it's not like he's been fantastic hitting this season, even though he's hit more home runs than he ever has. So you look at this lineup and you're like, okay, most of these guys are playing maybe a little bit better than you would expect, but it's not like they're all playing above their heads and they're going to come back down to earth eventually. This seems sustainable.
There's a lot of balance to what their lineup is right now. And considering that somebody who's top 5 in homers on this team is not even on the Major League roster right now is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah.
But Jacob Young, would you even expect him to sniff? So amongst active players, he has the 5th most homers on the Nats team. He had 3? In the first 3 years of his career, or 5 in the first 3 years of his career?
I joked with him. He had a baby in the offseason. I joked with him in spring training.
Dad strength.
Dad strength was going to show up. I didn't know that dad strength and drive line was going to lead to homers.
Right. I wanted to go back to the point on Abrams because he's done this in the past where he plays really well for the first month of the season, then he cools off for a month, then he gets hot again, then he cools off for 2 months. He's sustained what he's done all season long. He's had maybe a 10-day slump at most at some point. Abrams looks like an all-star player right now. He looks like one of the better shortstops in baseball, not from a defensive standpoint, but for what he's doing as a hitter. He looks like if you were playing second base, you'd be talking about him as one of the best second basemen in baseball right now.
Well, he's been putrid defensively.
Right,
And
but that's not surprising.
You're still talking about him as one of the best shortstops in all of baseball because you can live with that when you're getting the productivity you're getting out of him.
45 ribbies, man.
I mean, he's been spectacular, and it's one of those things, Strobes, he's such a talented player. So sometimes with talented players, you just have to give them simple advice, and when they're able to incorporate it, it can turn them into a really good player. It's not like he's got some great approach now. It's not like he's walking up there with some deep approach of, hey, I'm looking for pitches. He literally is walking up there with the most basic idea and plan of all time, saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to not swing at pitches on the corners, and I'm just going to swing at stuff over the middle of the plate.
Right. It's so simple because for so many years in this previous rebuild, in the Rizzo regime, the Darnell Coles era of Nats baseball.
That's your guy, by the way.
Yeah, that's definitely my guy. Shout out Mac Bordschulte, by the way, new Nats hitting coach who we had on Grant and Danny last week.
You want to start a narrative, Strobes? You want to know the reason that they won in Atlanta?
Because Darnell Coles? I mean, all I'm saying.
Darnell Coles. is
Ronald
working in
Ronald
Atlanta.
Acuna is not hitting anymore, and you wonder why.
You want to start a narrative?
But listen, they were giving away at bats like it
They
was
were.
nobody's business. They get up there and they spawn with 0-2 counts. Of course, you're gonna suck. You're gonna suck if you're down 0-2 every single at bat. They don't do that anymore. They're walking at a much better rate. I love the way, even though James Wood still strikes out all the time, I live with it because of the power. He's walked 45 times this year. He walks a lot. Even though he strikes out a lot, he's walking a lot as well. That's why his on-base percentage is nearly 400 right now. You can live with that. Everyone says, oh, he's striking out more than anybody in baseball. He's on base 400.
Yeah.
Why do you care?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to give and take. It's going to always be that case with James Wood. You're going to get good at bats. He's going to draw his walks. He's also going to strike out. It's just going to be what's going to the give and take there. But back to CJ specifically, he's interesting because of the trade discussions, and I want to get into that next. But just a simple approach change has literally changed how I feel about him, because watching him last season and previous seasons before that, at times he'd come to the plate and he looked like me playing MLB The Show. Like, all right, we're going to swing at every pitch we see, whether it's in the zone or out of the zone, and let's get this thing rolling. And this year, it's different. This year, you see a different CJ Abrams. His walk rate has jumped up almost 4% or 5%.
That's encouraging.
It's just such a different player, where if you asked me before the season, and we talked about this on Bust and Loose, me and Grant, would you trade CJ Abrams? My answer was definitively yes. I think I still would lean that way, but it's a little different now because this isn't the same CJ Abrams that I've seen the last couple of years. This CJ Abrams has a plan at the plate, and it's allowing his talent to go to that next level.
I agree. With the thing with Abrams and the trade conversations that we're going to get into, it's just how much can the fan base take of this cycle that they've been into. But the Nats are a different ball club right now. That's just the truth. They're not the same ball club they were. They don't operate the same way they did in the 2010s. And if that's going to be the case, you have to find ways to be successful. And it looks like with this group, Taboni, Butera, and Ani Colombi, who generates the lineup in his computer every single day, this is how they're going to do it. This is what they're going to make the sustainable path forward. And if trading Abrams is part of that equation, people are going to have to live with it.
Let's talk about that next. Do you think that the Nationals should trade CJ? 800-636-1067. If you're up early, want to hop in with us, 800-636-1067, because I think it's an intriguing discussion. Strobes and I will break it down next. Will the Nationals, or should the Nationals, trade CJ Abrams come the trade deadline? It's the Sports Junkies on Memorial Day. So Sports Junkies on Memorial Day. Tobes and Strobes sitting in for the guys. They'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m. Right now, talking about the Washington Nationals. CJ Abrams has been rolling. I want to get into the pitching staff. We'll get into that at 7 o'clock because that's something that they've got to fix, and that's something that maybe not necessarily this year needs to be fixed. We'll see what they can become this season, but definitely over the next couple of seasons, they're going to have to really figure out how to get that pitching. So we'll talk about that coming up at 7 o'clock. But, Strobe, CJ's been so spectacular this season, and it, like you said, it's not something that's new to see him play at a really high level. We've seen him play at borderline MVP levels for months at a time. We've seen this before, but it's just this season feels different because now you're into the end of May, and he's still doing this. He's had little slumps here and there, but not for very long, and I think just the little approach change of trying to identify good pitches to hit and not just swinging at everything has really changed a lot for him. He looks like a totally different player.
He does. And the way I look at it as well, the fact that they've kind of shifted him around in the lineup a little bit, even batting him in the cleanup role and as low as 6, I think, in the opening week with the computer-generated lineup with Abrams, he's gotten opportunities to drive runs in, and that's why he's done so at the highest clip in Major League Baseball right now at 45. Defensively, you still have a ton of those pitfalls that we've talked about over the last couple of seasons, but the fact that he's sustaining it right now, the walk rate going up 4%, as you mentioned in the last segment, it's a new approach for the guy. And it's made it into this kind of new look for Abrams where you can actually rely on him to be one of your star players for this team for an entire season. Because I think over the past couple of years, the reasons we've had these conversations about Abrams and whether or not he'd be here long term is because he was a little bit inconsistent. Like, yeah, when this guy's going, he's a really good player. But there's a lot of players around Major League Baseball, when they're going, they're good. But they're not going for a majority of the time. Abrams had kind of been on and off for a lot of his career. Play good 1 month, next 2 months aren't so great. He's doing it over the course of the entire season right now, and it's shown that it's sustainable. And I think with what the Nats are doing offensively, their new approach at the plate, the use of technology, data, the way they generate lineups, I think everything has kind of come together in a way for Abrams here now that he's 25 years old. He's really started to figure out things at the plate. I think maybe some of the things with the slumps that we had seen from him early on in his career, he could attribute to, poor development from the organization and him just being a young baseball player. He's starting to hit the peak of what he's going to be, and he's still got plenty of years where he's on the up and up, I think.
Yeah, so I'm trying to look at some teams that could potentially be interested because that's going to be the big talking point of CJ Abrams is, would you trade him at the trade deadline just to get more assets to add to this rebuild? And your point before the break, I think, is the big one for this team in that you don't have to make a move right now. You've got him. You got arbitration with him for the next 2 seasons.
Right.
So you don't have to make the move right now. It's not like, hey, you got to make a move or you're not going to keep him. You have him for at least a couple more seasons. At what point do you kill some of the momentum that this Nationals team has right now? I mean, we're talking about the Nationals right now, and people are interested, and this team looks like it's trending upward, and it's not like it's a slow upward arrow right now for the Nationals where this team's at. It's quite significantly hiking up in the interest level.
Right.
How many more times can you do hey, we got a good player, let's move on from him before fans start to lose some of that interest again?
Here's my question, because the fan base obviously isn't going to go as deep into the prospects and everybody that's up and coming within the Nationals organization because it's not something everybody can do. If you're watching baseball at a more casual level, you see Abrams, he looks like a star player. Then all of a sudden you hear the organization trade him. You think, it's the same old Nationals. They do this every single year. They did this with Harper. They did this with Soto. Oh, wait, where did they get Abrams? Oh, they got him from trading Soto. Mm-hmm. But it just depends. How good, if you're a Nationals fan or if you're the Nationals, how good do you feel about Eli Will? It's the number 1 prospect for the team right now. How confident are you Ronnie Cruz is going to be the next big thing? Devin Fitzgerald, who's been the most surprising thing, I think, in the farm system this year, now a top 5 prospect. Seaver King, waiting in the wings as Nell, just got the call to Rochester.
He could be here pretty soon, by the way.
So if you account for all of those things, if the organization truly feels great about those guys, that's going to help them make this decision going forward. Whether or not they envision a move to Abrams long-term playing at second, then you have those guys come up and play elsewhere in the field. You got to include Gavin Feene in this conversation as well, who they got in the Mackenzie Gore trade back in the offseason here. So there's a lot of young infield prospects that are up and coming throughout this organization. But the same thing applies for the fan base saying, I'm tired of hearing about young prospects that we're
Correct.
not going to see for 3 years. They're not going to be at the peak of their baseball power for another 5. When are we going to get off this cycle? Are we going to ever get off this train? And the answer to that is, I don't know. Because of the way ownership is right now, they don't spend a whole lot of money. We understand that. Like, it's a little bit redundant to bring it up every single time. But with that being the reality of the situation, the Nats have had to find another way to generate success offensively. And this data-driven format is the way they're going to do it. And trading Abrams might be part of that because they're going to need to stockpile as many assets as possible. But can the fans handle it is the question.
800-636-1067 if you want to hop in. We'll continue talking about trading CJ Abrams and if that is something that should be on the table for the Nationals come the trade deadline. I also want to get into their starting pitching. Also have identified 3 teams that I think could be potential trade candidates for CJ. So let's talk about that next. You want to hop in 800-636-1067. Again, should the Nationals consider trading CJ Abrams if he continues hitting like this going into the trade deadline? Because he could end up being the prize of the trade deadline, and you could get a haul. Look at what the Mackenzie Gore deal has already done for the farm system. We've obviously talked about the Juan Soto deal, which Abrams was a part of. So you could see a really good return. Is that something you consider, or is it one of those things that there's momentum for this team? Maybe you don't want to kill it by trading away one of your star players. We'll talk about it next. You're listening to the Sports Junkies with Tobes and Strobe sitting in on Memorial Day. Hour number 2 of the Sports Junkies. Tobi, Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the guys today. 800-636-1067 if you'd like to hop in with us. Been talking about the Washington Nationals. Took 2 of 3 over the weekend from the Atlanta Braves. Now they head to Cleveland for a 3-game series on parade watch for Grant and Danny. They're at 500. They win today. We'll have a parade tomorrow. So keep an eye on the Nats tonight. So before we went to break, we were talking about CJ Abrams and potentially a trade for him. Is that the right move if the Nationals were to go that direction? 800-636-1067. Real quick, Strobes, I want to throw out 3 teams that I came up with. Just looking, I think he'd be the belle of the ball if that were to be the case and he were to be available at the trade deadline. I think the biggest name that would be available potentially would be Tarek Skubal. The Tigers are 12 games under 500. If he can come back and pitch at least a couple of times before the trade deadline, he'd be the number one guy. But in terms of hitters, I think it probably would be CJ just because of the way that he's hitting and the years of control that he has left. So the 3 teams I came up with, and there would be others in the sweepstakes, I'm 100% sure of that. Mm-hmm. But Cleveland would be interesting because that's a team that's right now at the top of their division, and they're light at the shortstop position, although they have one of their top prospects at the shortstop position. But Brian Rocchio has been playing shortstop for them, and he's not really been all that great for them. Milwaukee is a team that isn't getting a lot from their shortstop position either, and that's a team that, understanding you could get a guy for 3 postseasons, 2 full seasons. Maybe you make a move. Joey Ortiz not getting it done at the plate, and they're good defensively, so maybe they can overcome some of CJ's defensive shortcomings. And then a big market team that could be interested that needs a shortstop, the New York Yankees, because Anthony Volpe is not cutting it. Jose Caballero's been playing. He's fine, nothing special. You add him into that lineup, especially with a short porch and right, I think that's something that they can consider. So I think there will be plenty of people interested in getting CJ if that does become a possibility. They would trade him.
Milwaukee is interesting to me that you bring him up because they have the number 1 ranked shortstop in prospect term in all of baseball right now. Is it Jesus? Is it Made or Made?
Made, and I don't think they would trade him, but they have other guys.
Okay, so in that equation then, but let's say if they did throw him in there, just as the Nationals saying, "Oh, we want our replacement at short," even though you probably have that with Seaver King right now or Willits. Then you'd have 2 top 3 shortstops in baseball in your farm system, which would be good. But if I'm going to move on from Abrams, I think I need a pitcher. I think I need legitimate starting pitching on this team because if anything right now that this season has taught me about Nationals baseball going forward is that with the new lineup stuff, the data and everything they've been doing, we understand they're going to hit the baseball. The offense is going to be the strength of this team going forward, it looks like, because they've shown that they can sustain this, what they're doing right now with the guys they have in the lineup, with really the only legitimate stars you could say is Abrams and Wood. Going forward, though, pitching is the biggest question mark. You have a bottom 5 ERA in baseball right now. I know they've been a little bit better over the last couple of weeks, but you don't have reliable arms in your rotation right now. And if anything, if the Nationals are going to operate where they're not spending much money like they have over the last 6 or 7 years right now, the one thing that you have to imagine here is if you're going to ever open the wallet, you feel like it's got to be for a starting pitcher. That's where it just really comes into play. I think if you're going to find a legitimate starting pitcher in this league, I think you got to spend a little bit of money on it. But if you're the Nationals in this instance and you want to trade one of your players like Abrams, would you at least want to get a legitimate starting pitching option that you're going to have under team control for 4 to 5 years if that's the case?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Logan Henderson would be a name I'd be interested in. He's someone that the Nationals saw. He got called up to start the final game of the series earlier this season when they were pitching here at Nationals Park, and he was spectacular. So that's a name that they could keep an eye on. So that'd be interesting. I don't think they'd be able to get Made, but if they were able to get Made, fantastic. He's one of the best prospects in all of baseball, but they've got other infielders as well. Luis Pena is someone that's in rookie ball that's a top prospect. Cooper Pratt, they just paid a contract to, so I don't think that they would necessarily trade him, but I think there are some intriguing guys for the Brewers and some other organizations, and I think because of the fact that there will be other teams involved, they can maybe get a little bit more.
Right.
800-636-1067. We'll get to your pitching talk in just a moment, but would you consider trading CJ Abrams if he continues hitting at this rate and you get towards the trade deadline and he is the top hitter on the market? Let's start with Mark in Landover Hills. Mark, what's going on?
Show is a great show, and you guys do a great job. And don't forget, I told you that before, Toby. And man, this is where you guys really excel. You too, Ben. You guys do a great job. And shout out to Max, buddy.
Thank you.
hey, guys, man, you guys are spot on. No, they should not trade Abrams. They should keep him. They keep talking about, for the last 3 or 4 years, trading him or trading Luis Garcia, and they should have their head examined if they trade either one of them. Both of them are trying to get better, and they should keep them.
Appreciate it, Mark. Yeah, I think this is where it gets tough because I don't blame fans. At what point is enough enough? Now, the tough part for the Nationals and Paul Taboni, I'm not the one that's done any of the other stuff before this. Like, I traded away Mackenzie Gore if I'm Paul Taboni. Like, he's made that decision.
We all knew that was coming, though.
Yeah, and I think that was the right move.
Absolutely.
But if you're looking at other moves like the Soto, he wasn't a part of that. Now, fans have been. So I understand that fans are going to be frustrated if they move off of CJ Abrams. So I wouldn't blame them in the slightest if they look at it and say, well, what the heck? What am I doing if we're just going to keep moving off of guys?
Right. The Soto deal is different, though, because it's not like the Nats didn't try to pay him. They tried to pay him $440 million, and he said no. Like, okay. And he got almost double that amount. I can't fault either side, I guess, at that point, because it's not like they didn't try to pay him. Maybe there was a lot of, was there deferred money attached to that?
Yeah, there was. I'm sure there was.
Okay, all right. So then maybe if you want to put some of the onus on that, but it's not like the Dodgers don't do that.
Yeah,
but this is a whole different group now.
Because you can just,
it doesn't even matter at this point. He
defer $680 million of a $700 million contract.
Right,
it's no problem.
And Soto just got $765 million. So what are you going to do about that? The Nats are obviously not doing that. Nobody's doing that outside of the Dodgers and the Mets. Like, with the Yankees even to give out a contract like that? I guess not.
Yeah, apparently not.
It's interesting. This group will have a big decision to make with this going forward. You don't have to do it this year. I think if you want to get him at peak value, you are looking at potentially doing it this summer, though, because he is under team control for 2 years. And you bring up some of these smaller market teams that might be interested in him because they feel like their window is now. The Brewers are playing incredible baseball right now. And if you're like, okay, we can get Abrams, he's a guy he's under Rock Nation, doesn't seem like he's going to be an extension candidate. We're probably not signing him to a long-term deal. But if we get him here at age 25, you have him under team control for another 2 years, we feel like we have a window in the next 2 years to go out and try to win a World Series. This makes the most sense. Let's sell off some of the best pitching prospects that we have right now, some of the other better prospects that we have in the organization, because he can help us win right now for the next 2 seasons. That's where the small market teams become interesting, because they're not really looking to add him right now because they think he's going to be a Brewer for life or a Guardian for life.
Correct.
Like, that's probably not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, the Rays are another team that could be interesting there as well. I mean, you talk about small market, and they've got some good prospects. They always have a good farm system, so that's an interesting one as well. Let's get out to Kurt in Ashburn. Kurt, what's going on?
Good morning, gents. I'm not in favor of trading him. I think what we did with Rizzo and Davey run the show was you got enough talent through minor moves and the farm team to be right on the cusp of doing well. Then they went out and got Jason Worth, later on Scherzer, Corbin, Anibal, and they did it. And obviously it worked because we had a World Series. And I think you can't risk trading him because he really looks like he's going to hit the whole year. However, I'll say this: 3 weeks ago, he hit a ball that went to right field, looked like it was a home run. They had a guy in second, and he trotted because he thought it was a home run, and he ended up getting thrown out at second. And I said, "Oh no!" I thought after
that was an opening day.
Last year. What's that?
That was an opening day. I know what you're talking about in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was opening day. And however, I subsequently learned that as soon as he got back to the dugout, he apologized, which he was not inclined to do last year. So I think he may be maturing, and I don't think we should take the risk. And here's my big reason for wanting to trade him. I'm older than amino acids, damn it. I'm 78, and I wanted to win before I go.
Let's go.
Hey, I
Thanks,
love
Kurt.
that, Kurt. Appreciate the phone call. Yeah, at some point, too, Kurt, older fans, like, what the heck, man? I can't keep rebuilding for the rest of the time here.
But it feels like now this is where they're actually rebuilding.
Yes.
They orchestrated a god-awful rebuild. Not because they didn't necessarily do things right. They did what they were supposed to in trading away guys like Soto and picking up some really good prospects. Gore became, one of the better options. Didn't really look like a ace pitcher for this team, but maybe you saw him being a formidable second or third starter, whether or not he'd be here long term. Wood, who's blossoming into a superstar. Abrams, who looks good. Still have Robert Hassel in AAA waiting in the wings, and Susanna as well, who might come up and do something for this team. But the lack of development is what plagued this rebuild from working. And now you feel like you have a group here that can develop players. The way they've completely reworked their farm system, just from what I've heard from some of the guys that are working within some of the minor league ball clubs, like in Fredericksburg, the way they've embraced competition. Everything is a competition now within the organization. Batting practice, they chart everything. They keep data of everything. This is how they have to operate. And now that they finally have understood that, there's a real reason to be excited about the way they develop batting talent. So I understand it. Like, it's tough. Like, how long can you spin the tires on this cycle of trading away your best players? It's a kick in the shins to the fans every single time. But if you can be confident in the group to develop guys and have the next star waiting in the wings, then maybe you don't feel as bad about it if you're getting a legitimate starting pitcher in return, something that's going to really make this ball club better at some point. But you are making your team worse in the short term by getting rid of Abrams, of course.
Yeah, and one of the tough parts about it is I think you have to look at this team and be honest with yourself about what they are. I don't think they're contending for a World Series this season. I don't think anyone thinks that.
No.
I don't think they're contending for a World Series next season. So then you're looking at it, okay, so maybe, say by the time you get to 2028, you feel good. So you got 1 year of CJ, and then you're looking at maybe are you trading him then because of the fact that maybe you're trying to... So that's the difficulty. I would love to try to maybe extend him now because this is a different, he's not Scott Boras with his agency, right? So it's maybe somebody that you could potentially get a deal done with. And to me, looking at CJ, I'm starting to come around on the idea of him sticking around because for me, it was going into the year, early part of the season, like, okay, this is CJ doing CJ things. He's gotten off to a good start, but if it's the same old CJ, then I'll probably move him at the deadline. I'll get a good haul, and then we'll be on to the next wave, and James Wood is the face of the franchise, and he's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, right? So that could stay the same. But this is a different CJ. This is a building block kind of player. This is a difference maker in the middle of the order. This isn't just hey, that's a pretty good shortstop with some potential. He's 25. They still got some years before he hits his true ceiling of what you would consider his prime, late into his 20s, early 30s. So if that's the case, and you're seeing this guy as already a top 3 hitter at the shortstop position in the league, why wouldn't you try to keep him around? And that's the tough part. I think that's where you have to try to weigh that one out. Because if CJ goes back to being the CJ we saw the last couple of seasons where it's a 747 ops, okay, I probably can move off of that. If this is a dude that's going to have an 850 plus ops this year, right now it's over 900.
Right.
That's a tough guy to take out of your order.
It is. One of the things as well with Abrams, I think it's already too late for the extension, unfortunately. I think if that was going to get done last year would have been a perfect time to do it. And now that he's playing so well, it gets more difficult every single day that passes to get this done, whether or not it was even a realistic, if it was a pipe dream or not. But if you look at anything, and we've had this conversation on Grant and Danny a bunch of times recently, if the Nationals, if you were going to see a headline right now from Passan saying that the Nationals have given a contract extension to anyone, who would it be? And there's people that would be like, oh, Dalen, the answer is obviously James Wood. If it's anything other than James
Correct.
Wood, you are crazy. But Abrams is right there next in line. Then if you want to go deeper into the weeds and say, yeah, I want to see Dalen Lyle get an extension for this organization, okay, like then we're having some productive conversations. Maybe something like that could happen at some point. But if you want to really get this fan base back into the team, show them you are serious about what you're building with this group you have right now. If you somehow did get an extension done with Abrams or Wood, like the Wood thing, it just seems like it's out of the equation because he's a Boras guy. It's just something that's not going to happen. But Abrams, I think you got to push for it. If you can push to get that extension done and lock him up long term and show the fan base that you are serious about actually building a baseball team that's worth a damn over the next 10 years here, that's something you get done. But I just don't really have a lot of confidence that's going to happen at this point.
Let's get to Miss P in D.C. What's going on?
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. Y'all got me riled up this morning. It will be a kick in the gut if we trade Abrams. He playing my spot. He playing shortstop. And I'm telling you, they trade him. He brings a lot of excitement to the club. They're doing their thing. Why trade him, like you said, keep him a couple of years? And, he's doing real good. I tell you one thing, they can trade him if they want to. Another Soto. We couldn't even keep Trey.
Yeah,
that's right.
I will be out there with a sign, and I will not go in. I will not wear their gear, and I will protest. I do not want to go through that again. And the same for the Commanders. We go in there with no other more receivers, and we start losing. I'm not rooting for them no more either. I will be done. And I'm from D.C., born and raised.
Hey, I appreciate that
Thank
passion.
you, Miss P.
Appreciate the phone call, Miss P. Yeah, I think that's the tough part right there. I
think a lot of people feel like her.
I don't blame her at all.
Right.
This team has been so tough to watch since 2019. Now, here's an interesting thing I was thinking of. Do you keep CJ with the impending lockout, potential ownership change after the lockout?
This is what I keep coming back to, Toby.
Do you think, okay, maybe I can keep him because this is somebody I could pay if there is a change?
It's a great question. We've had so many conversations about this. Is it better for baseball to add a salary cap and a floor, or for them to make sure they don't miss games next year? Which is more important for the sport? Because there's good momentum for baseball right now with the recent rule changes. Are you throwing all of that away if they miss half a season next year or worse? Because it seems like a work stoppage is inevitable right now. The one thing I will say, if a salary cap is unlikely in this situation, a floor could be very beneficial for a team like the Nationals because you'd be forced to spend something.
Well,
If you have an extra $20 million that you have to spend on starting pitcher or just a player for that matter, it could be really important. But I come back to this point a lot. If the Lerners are ever going to be interested in selling this team, it would be after the new CBA agreement. Because if there's one thing about the Lerners that we've understood, even when they put the team for sale back 4 or 5 years ago, whenever that was, and then eventually took the team off the market, they don't do business unless it's done their way. They don't do it unless it's done their way. And I feel like after the pending lockout, whatever happens with Major League Baseball next year, then is where you could see maybe the tide turn for the organization if they're interested in selling it, or if there is a new CBA agreement where there is a salary cap and floor, then the Lerners maybe be a little bit more inclined to spend a little bit because they feel like they could compete with some of these other teams in Major League Baseball. We understand they're not going to spend money like the Dodgers, like the Yankees, like the Giants for that matter. They're not going to do that. So how are you going to find a way to compete and win?
Can I throw out some crazy thoughts here real quick?
Do it.
So what if there is a possibility that the Lerners would spend money? Because right now you are spending still on Max Scherzer. You're still spending money on Steven Strasburg. Strasburg will come off of the books after the 2029 season. He's still making 26.6, 26.6, and 27 and 28, and then 30 million and 29.
So what's their payroll with players not on the roster right now?
So I'm trying to look at that exactly, but they're still paying. Let's see, in 2026, this season, they are still paying Steven Strasburg 35 or 20. The luxury tax is at 35. I'm not exactly sure what SpotTrack has here, but I guess that 24 million somewhere around there, and then Max Scherzer is getting 15 million of deferred money. So theoretically, by the time that these contracts actually have to go through and you have to sign these things and you're paying them their big money, there's a potential that Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer are no longer on the payroll, especially Scherzer, but potentially Strasburg as well. And if that's the case, 25 a year for CJ is probably around the price tag anyways. Somewhere around there. Because you got to think of CJ, long-term, if you want to keep CJ, he can't play shortstop.
He's got to play second.
He's probably got to play second. I think he'd actually be a pretty good center fielder, but this team doesn't really need another center fielder. But I also feel like this is also one that you could just move stuff around. This is the kind of guy, if he's hitting like this, that you move stuff around for him.
But what
not
if
vice versa.
What if Dylan Cruz doesn't work out?
Well, and that's the thing, is that's part of what you got to figure out here. That's part of because what if it is something too that he becomes your fourth outfielder? Right. God forbid.
We're closer to Cruz not working long term than him becoming a star, which is unfortunate for a number 2 overall pick. Obviously, it's way too early to close the book on him.
Yeah, I think it's early on that, but I see where you're going with that.
Right, and he's also a Boris guy, so that you have to account for that every single time. Is this organization going to not do business with Boris guys? Is what I'm wondering. And I know it's not the same group because technically DeBartolo made the draft pick, but they took Will. It's not a Boris guy over Ethan Holiday.
Yeah, that is interesting. 800-636-1067. We'll keep talking about the Nationals. Let's talk about the starting pitching, trying to fix some of that, and then we'll get into a little more of the CJ stuff as well. I want to get into the Wizards at some point as well, talk about their draft as well. What should they do with that number 1 overall pick? Should they trade it? Should they just take A.J. DeBonsa? We'll talk about all those things and more. Tobes and Strobes sitting in for the Junks on Memorial Day. Tobes and Strobes in for the Junks today on Memorial Day. Wrapping up our Nationals discussion because I want to get into some Wizards talk with you, Strobes. But the big thing that the Nationals are going to have to figure out is how to get their pitching. And maybe it's not going to be this season because I do think that as much as we talked about CJ, if they don't make a CJ move, I do think that there's a chance that they could move Foster Griffin, which would frustrate some people. But I think with him being on a one-year contract, that's something potentially that you could end up doing down the line. But looking at their starting pitching, that's going to be the big question for me about this team is how do they go about getting that starting pitching, whether it's through the draft, trading for guys, because I don't think they're signing guys at the top of the market, and that's fine, by the way. I mean, you look at some of the teams that have good pitching, it's not always the guys that go out and spend $200 million on pitching, even though that's what this team has done in the past with Max Scherzer. But how are they going to get that pitching? And I think it's going to have to be through development of guys that they already have and guys that they're going to draft in the future, because otherwise I just don't know how you're going to get that starting pitching that this team needs.
That's what it seems to be, at least in the grand scheme of things, what they've done in terms of prospects in their system right now. Obviously, you have a couple of guys that are on the mend, Travis Sakura, who got surgery, Susanna, who's been hurt a little bit, and then some of these flame-throwing guys as well that you've thrown into the mix. Miguel Sime, single-A Fredericksburg guy who looks like the most dominant thing we've seen in single-A ball when he has control. But you're looking at a significant period of time before these guys are legit formidable starters in the league. So you have to be honest with yourself and say, what is the real window for contention for the Nationals? Is it by 2028? Is it 2 years from now? Is it after the CBA thing that happens next year? What is the legitimate window? Because if you're looking at something sooner rather than later, then you're going to have to find a way to address some immediate needs at the starting pitching role. Because, like you said, Foster Griffin's kind of been this flash-in-the-pan guy coming over from Japan. I didn't expect much from the guy. I didn't know a lot about the guy. But he's been the best starter for the team this year. And I think a lot of people are still relatively high, I'd say, on Cade Cavalli. But he's had his moments where he has slipped through the cracks a little bit or maybe looked like a guy that just doesn't have the wherewithal to go 6 innings on any given start. But I think he's been a little bit better about that as of recent. But you still need a number one pitcher on this team at some point, whether or not that is a guy that you pick up at the trade deadline or that's a guy that you sign in for agency. That's going to be what the Nationals need to find going forward. Because I think the arms you have in the rotation, what you have in terms of prospects right now, are intriguing. There's reason to believe that some of these guys could work out. Maybe some of them do move to the bullpen eventually. Like these flame-throwing guys that we talk about, Susanna, like, is there realistically a path for him to being a starting pitcher long-term, or injury is going to derail him? Is he going to become a closer for this team? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. It's hard to answer these questions when they're playing minor league baseball. We don't find out a lot about these guys sometimes until they get to the bigs, and that's why people have thrown out the idea of Cavalli being a bullpen guy, because they haven't seen him be able to kind of go deep into these games.
So real quick, you mentioned Miguel Sime. In 24 innings, in 9 starts, 4th-round pick last year, how many strikeouts do you think he has for Fredericksburg?
Ooh.
24 innings.
For last year, you said?
No, this year.
Oh, in 24 innings? I think he's got like 55 plus.
51.
51. That's incredible.
51 strikeouts.
It's over 2 per inning.
In 24 innings.
Oh my God.
Insane. Absolutely insane. So hopefully that's
103? That's right. He throws 103, right?
I'm not sure exactly what he throws on the gun somewhere, but it's triple digits. 19 years old, 6'4", 235, throws gas. Good luck touching that guy.
The only problem with pitchers that are that young now that throw that hard is like the inevitable is they get TJ, right?
Yeah. That's the difficulty. So hopefully they can keep him healthy.
You get it sooner though.
To develop him.
Isn't that like kind of the way people do it now? You get it when you're younger, and then you hope that you don't ever have to get it again.
I just prefer that you never get it.
Well, obviously, but it seems like everybody does.
It is true. It does seem like that's kind of an inevitability. Let's talk about the Wizards, Strobes.
Let's do it.
So, number 1 pick, they win the lottery. One thing that I didn't love, and it's just something that we get stuck with. We just had a discussion about it with the Nationals about trade, this, that. One thing I didn't necessarily love is it seems like the way that our discussion about the number 1 overall pick went was, yay, we won the number 1 overall pick. Hey, should we trade it? Like, I think you got to at least ponder. It seems like we spent too much time talking about trade. Could you just take the dude at number 1?
That's what I keep saying. Have you ever seen an organization that got the first pick that immediately is thrown into so many conversations about them not taking a player first overall.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I didn't hear any of this with the Mavericks last year.
Well,
I mean, I know
different draft.
I know it's a different draft, but like, I don't know. Like, Dylan Harper's a heck of a player.
It's annoying as hell, though, because the Wizards are not treated the same by the average NBA fan. I get it. They've been bad for 47 years. I understand.
So have the Utah Jazz.
Well, I guess they've had a little bit more sustained stuff, but they don't have the title. The Wizards have the title.
Yeah, I mean,
1978.
Yeah, but the Jazz haven't been relevant for most of my life either.
It's a good point. Outside of Donovan Mitchell, I guess, and Gobert, when they had a little flash in the pan. It's kind of similar to the Wizards, though. They had the Wall and Beal era going on for the 2010s, and it didn't really amount to much. They never even, same thing for Utah. They didn't get to any conference finals
Darren
with those
Williams
guys.
And Carlos Boozer, whatever, okay? Like, I just don't understand why we spent so much time talking about, well, you got to really consider, I understand all the ties for DeBonsa to Utah. You also could just take the guy. You can just take DeBonsa. Not overthink this.
Right. I don't give a damn about his Utah connection. He's been there for 2 years. They pried him there with a lot of money, and I understand it was more than money that went into that decision. I've talked to people over there, and part of the reason he wanted to go there was so he'd be the number 1 overall pick. There are less distractions in Utah. He went to a school where he had NBA coaching develop him. That is why he went to BYU. He got paid a lot of money in the process. I understand that. His number 1 goal in his life has been to be the number 1 overall pick. And to me, he has been vocal about that. He has been deservingly vocal about that because he is a guy that absolutely is in the equation. He deserves to be a number 1 overall pick. I think Darren Peterson is also a deserving candidate for the number 1 overall pick. But this all comes down to the Wizards' due diligence with this front office. And I understand, I see Wizards fans go crazy when you see these rumors saying that, the Wizards are going to consider all 4 of these options. They're going to hear offers from people. I understand that. People get upset about it. Why are you so upset about it? You've wanted a competent front office for so long. You wanted a front office that moved with foresight, one that actually thought about things before they did it. Just let the process happen. This is what a smart front office does. They're not going to tell you they're taking DeBonsa right now. They're taking Peterson. Of course, they're saying they're considering all 4 options. That's how they do it. This is how it's supposed to be done. If DeBonsa is their number 1 guy, they should just take him. If Peterson is their number 1 guy, just take him. This is the power of choice. Dawkins came on this show and said it himself. The one thing we have right now is the power of choice. We haven't had that in the past. You get to pick who you think the best player is to change your franchise. Take somebody 1.
Yeah, that's what I like, is you hold the cards. So I don't really care that maybe I could get Ace Bailey. I'd love that.
They're not going to get him, though.
I don't think they would. But, okay, it's not to say that I'm closed-minded and say, no, stop calling Utah. I'm not taking any trade offers. Not to say that I'm
listening.
Dumb. I'm listening to it.
Of course we
but
are.
I think the best option here is you just take the guy at number 1, whoever you think it is. I prefer AJ. They may prefer Darren. I don't really care which way it goes of those 2. Whatever they deem is the best guy, you take him. And you build around that guy. And that can be your future right there. That's it. Because I can just see it now, and it'd be the most DC thing ever of a sports team if they traded out of the number 1 overall pick, and then they get the number 2 pick, and then that number 1 guy turns out to be the stud we all thought he would be, and the number 2 dude's a bust. Wouldn't that be the most DC thing ever? So just take the guy that you think is the best. It's the thing I always end up with. We talk about this in free agency and football and overspending and certain things. Wouldn't you just rather have the guy you want?
Yes.
At the end of the day, you'd be like, yeah, they overspent by a couple million, or they should have done that. Wouldn't you just rather walk away with, you know what, we wanted AJ DeBonsa and we walked away with AJ DeBonsa? Could we have had, say they would trade Ace Bailey, could we have had Darren Peterson and Ace Bailey and throw me a crazy offer? Sure. You know what I prefer, though? I need the star. That's what this team needs. They need the star. Right. And whoever you think is more likely to be the star, you take them. And I don't think I don't think it's one of those things either where, to me, they may be in the same tier, Peterson and DeBonsa. They are similar in terms of what their ceiling is, what they're going to be able to do for you. But I also think in terms of the way that I would build my team, and this is just personal, but I would build around a guy with more size. And so I'm not going to give that up to build around a guard and Darren Peterson.
That's the argument. That's the argument right there that I've been making for weeks at this point in terms of positional flexibility. That's something the Wizards front office has cared a lot about. Guys that have a plus when it comes to positional size. The dude measuring nearly 6'9" without his shoes on. He's going to play nearly 6'10" with shoes.
And he's going to grow too. Probably.
And he has an insanely low center of gravity, a better ball handler than the majority of guys in the league at his size. It's unbelievable. This is a league where even in the postseason, as we've seen, players that dominate rim pressure off the wing are so important for your team. He gets to the free throw line a ton as well. And I want to go back to the point about picking who you want. Everybody thinks it's a foregone conclusion that the Jazz want AJ. They want AJ so bad because of what's happened over the last couple of years with Ryan Smith. Smith said himself that Danny Ainge, he's like, we have smart people running our front office now. This isn't like some kind of weird thing where I'm making all the decisions. We have a very smart executive in Danny Ainge who's, one, he's risky to do business with. We've seen like the precedent of a team that traded up to get the first pick in Philadelphia a couple years back because Ainge knew that he wanted his guy at 3 in Tatum, and Markelle Fultz was a total bust. And I know injury was a big reason why for that, obviously, but like that's what happens when you do business with this guy. That makes it impossible to figure out what he's even thinking right now. Because if let's say the Wizards trade back because, I don't know, everybody is so enamored with the idea that Utah is 100% going with AJ. What if the Utah Jazz traded up because they want Darren and they think the Wizards are getting Darren? If you trade back, if you're the Wizards and you don't even get the guy that you want the most, then it's a massive failure. You have to get your top guy, no matter what. Whoever your number one player is on this board, if you're Will Dawkins and Michael Winger, you have to get that player. Whether or not you get that by sticking and picking at 1 or trading back, you have to get that guy or it's a failure.
And one thing that I feel people look at too much and think about too much is this isn't an NFL type trade where NFL, you've got a 53-man roster, you've got 22 starters, you've got guys starting all over the playing, different position, doing all these different things. So getting extra capital, getting extra guys, that can mean more than what it does in the NBA. Say they could add an Ace Bailey. Not to say that wouldn't be good, but Ace Bailey and Darren Peterson for AJ DeBonsa. That's fine. The Wizards have rotation guys. I think they're
deep. They've
got 10 playable guys, if not more.
They're deep now.
In terms of like guys that I would trust to potentially get playoff minutes. Not just, hey, I think that this dude could give you something. Like, that's not even mentioning guys that I like growing in roles like Jameer Watkins. And like, think about the names Trey Young, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, Anthony Davis. We'll see about him, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson, Will Riley. What's that, 8 or 9 I've already...
Justin Champagnie.
Okay, add in DeBonsa. That's 10 dudes. If you watch the NBA playoffs, it's not like teams are going 12 deep. Like, that's probably more than you'd use anyways.
It's hard to do. And OKC, I think, goes to about 10 deep. And that's considered really deep for playoff basketball. And that's what makes them so hard to beat right now. And obviously San Antonio's done it. They have an insanely deep rotation as well. The Wizards have a very, very beneficial thing on their side now that they have depth. And they have depth at various positions that matter, including the wing. And I know you can make the argument saying, oh, Peterson would be more my guy because you already have so many different wings on this team that need minutes. I don't really care. If AJ is going to be better than all those guys, then of course you're going to take this guy. If the Wizards think DeBonsa is the best player on the board, that's who they'll take number 1 overall. That he's that level of player right now. And I know he's not Victor Wembanyama, he's not LeBron James, or maybe not even Cooper Flagg, for that matter, in terms of being a consensus number 1 guy. But you can't undermine where this guy is as a prospect. He's one of the better prospects in years still.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a little bit ludicrous how everyone's just acting like Cooper Flagg was fantastic last season. I don't think he's like head and shoulders above all the prospects from this year's draft. Like, I think the reason that people are talking about DeBonsa and Peterson the way is because they're both so freaking good that no one stands head and shoulders above the rest.
Right. Peterson just had the weird year at Kansas. If he didn't have the weird year, then this conversation would be even closer. I think it'd still be very close between DeBonsa and Peterson if he didn't have the weird year at Kansas. But Peterson's not as vocal about the number 1 pick stuff. He's kind of more of the silent killer, and some people are saying, I'm seeing Kobe Bryant in that guy because he has Mamba mentality. He's silent. He just kind of goes about his business and he dominates on the basketball court. But when you see DeBonsa and Peterson match up on the floor, which we've seen a couple of times in high school, it happened one time in college last year, Peterson goes crazy. He's a big game riser.
He is.
Whether or not people understand that about him right now, I think the same thing can be said about Dabatsa. He put up 35 in the NCAA tournament just as the only guy that could do anything offensively for that BYU team.
The Peterson comp and the Kobe comp, I think, is interesting because Kobe didn't play in college, and neither did Darren Peterson. 800-636-1067 if you would like to hop in. Should the Wizards just stay at number 1 overall? We've talked plenty about trading down. Should they just stay at number 1 overall, even if they could trade down and get extra with the Utah Jazz? Should they just stay with the first pick and take Dabatsa or Peterson? 800-636-1067. Tobes and Strobes in for the Junks. So Sports Junkies on Memorial Day. Tobi, Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the guys, talking about the Washington Wizards. 800-636-1067 if you'd like to hop in. We'll talk to Glenn Consor in just over an hour at 9 o'clock, get his thoughts on some of what we're discussing right now. Also want to talk to him about the Trey Young, Anthony Davis stuff and what this team could be next season. We'll get into the Commanders coming up at 8. But Strobes, we were talking in the break about this with the number 1 overall pick. AJ DeBonsa versus Darren Peterson. I do think that they are in a similar tier. I do think that both of them can help you immediately. I think both of them can be a very good scorer for this team almost right out of the chute. But if I had to choose whether I'm building around a guard or a wing, in the modern NBA, I'm taking the wing.
I'm with you on that. Because what we've seen from a lot of these teams that have been built around guards, there's a couple of exceptions, obviously. Steph Curry, who, as you told me in the break, it's unique. He's the best shooter in NBA history. So that's a whole different story that you're talking about here. Teams like Anthony Edwards, lethal combo guy. Maybe Peterson could be in a similar realm as a guy like Peterson. SGA, who's a bit more unique because he doesn't play out on the perimeter as much as your standard combo guy. He gets to the rim, he gets to the free throw line, and he operates out of the mid-range. So it's a little bit different because SGA plays the way you would with a wing, like a guy like AJ. If you're to take the choice of picking which player you're going to build around here, which skill sets you necessarily need, you're probably taking the guy that's 6'9.5", gets to the rim often, and maybe has a growing game from the outside. I know the three-point shot's been a bit of a knock for DeBonsa, 33% in his rookie season, wasn't so great, or in his freshman season at BYU, wasn't great on his catch-and-shoot opportunities, but he's a 99th percentile mid-range player. He's almost automatic from the mid-range, and how much are you valuing that right now? A guy like SGA has made you value that more, I'd say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with that because I do think that he can fix his three-point shot.
I do too. It's not broken.
I don't think it's something that – I think there are maybe little things that they can work on and it'll get worked out. I also think it's something, too, there's repetitions, he'll get better at it. I mean, I just personally, when I watch NBA basketball, I think that the onus on having size is so important now versus not that it wasn't before, but having versatile size. I think maybe more so is the correct way to phrase it because there was a time when the NBA was built around size in terms of power forwards and centers, and you're running two bigs and you're playing out of the post. It's not that way anymore. But I need to have guys that are 6'8" and taller that can guard multiple positions, that can also do a little bit of everything. And I can play through those guys because now there are so many athletic guys that size that I can throw one of them on a Devin Booker and somewhat slow him down because of the fact that he's not going to be able to get by him and get to the rim, and now he's having to shoot over extra length. Versus AJ is not going to be as affected by that length because of his own size. So that's the tough part, I think, is it's not a knock on Darren Peterson per se.
Right.
Because I love... I grew up watching Dwayne Wade. I grew up watching Kobe Bryant, and those were some of my favorite players of all time, and that was an era that was dominated by shooting guards, I would say. I don't think this era is, and so if you're giving me the opportunity to choose between the two, yeah, it'd be nice to potentially trade down and get extra assets, but the thing that the team needs the most right now is that star that they're going to build around for the next decade plus, and if I'm choosing which of the two guys at the top of this draft I'm doing that with, I'm choosing the guy that's a little bit bigger in AJ DeBonsa.
And I think if he's given the reins relatively early in his career, he's going to hit his capabilities a lot sooner than people would imagine in terms of his point average. I think he can average 25 points per game within 2 to 3 years of his career. That's how talented he is scoring the basketball. That's how often he's going to get to the rim even at the next level, just with his skill set and what he does well at his size. He's very hard to stop. He is a downhill force. And that's something that you value a lot in the NBA, and you value it in the NBA playoffs. The thing that's interesting about the Wizards, whether or not they go DeBonsa or they go Peterson, you're putting them in a different situation that I think benefits either one of these guys because you have some young talent that's on the up and up on this roster already. You have guys that have been in the league for a couple of years already in Altizer and Keyshawn George. And just when you have that in the wings, you don't have to carry as much of a load on your young guy that you expect to be your superstar. Hell, you even have Trey Young and Anthony Davis who are going to play for this team. These are your formidable all-star players that if you have them playing, they're going to stabilize things and be the force that you need for this year upcoming. And I've said this for the time being, Trey Young and Anthony Davis, those are the faces of the franchise for the Wizards for this year. but that's not going to be the case long term. And when you have Debonsa or Peterson that you have just kind of grooming right now, learning the NBA level, because it's different. It takes time when you come out of the college game to really adjust to what the NBA is. It's pretty rare to see a guy take over and morph into a star in year number one. I guess you could say Flagg has sort of done so in a way in his rookie season. Harper has been really, really good as a rookie guard, especially. But it's going to take time for some of these guys. And with the timeline the Wizards are on right now, I think they're setting it up perfectly for a guy like Debonsa to come in, and by year number 3 or 4 of his career, he's going to be able to hit the peak and hit the ground running and be the superstar they need.
What do you make of the Peterson point guard stuff?
I see it because I know everyone's like, high school tape, where do you even see it? He had more burst. He was more explosive, and there were some flashes of that in his rookie season. And I'm not going to dismiss his ability to create and play make for others. I know his assist numbers were low, but he makes good reads. If you just watch the games, he makes decent reads. You can see the point guard mindset that he has, but he is a little bit more score first minded, I would say, than he is pass first.
Sure.
So it depends. Where do you value a true point guard in your roster? Trey Young is a legitimate, honest to God point guard.
He's a point guard, yeah.
That's what the Wizards have right now. And there's a lot of teams in the NBA that are really successful that go that route. Some teams go point guard by committee, and you have multiple guys that can handle the basketball, that can distribute. But what is the best route to go? I'm not sure if point guard by committee or having these combo guys is the way, unless you have an SGA or an Ant Edwards for that matter. I think what the Wizards are doing with a pure bona fide one that can get guys open, that can space the floor, that can get you touches in the paint, but you don't have to worry about the volume of shot being insanely high, because I don't think Trey Young is going to be as high usage as he was in Atlanta as he's here in DC. That's why I feel like Trey Young makes sense on the Wizards roster right now, especially if you draft a guy like AJ.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those guys can develop off the ball, with Trey Young dominating the ball in their rookie season. Be interesting to see how they can develop into scoring the ball off the ball. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, let's get into the Commanders. I want to talk about Terry McLaurin. So we heard earlier this offseason, David Blau said that he wants to get Terry 10 targets a game. What would that look like if Terry actually gets that? What would this offense look like, and what does a stat line for Terry McLaurin look like if he gets 10 targets a game? 800-636-1067 if you'd like to hop in. Tobes and Strobes in for the Junks on Memorial Day.
how important a wide receiver is going to be to the success of your offense?
Incredibly, man. Like these guys, whether they're sparking a long run in the running game with blocking on the perimeter or creating explosive passes, like this thing's going to be built around how do we get Terry 10 targets a game and get him, explosive receptions after explosive receptions to kind of flip the field. And Jalen Lane and Luke and Ja'Cory and Jacoby and Nick, the guys that we have under contract right now, like how can we develop them and grow them into roles that are just, key contributors when their number's called on Sunday.
That's Commanders offensive coordinator David Blau talking about getting Terry the football 10 times a game, or at least targeting him 10 times a game. What does it look like if that happens this year? 800-636-1067. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober in with you. So I want to throw some numbers out here for you, Strobes, because
Let me hear it.
Let's just go ahead and try to calculate this out. Let's try to figure this out, because we were talking in the break about, is this something that's realistic?
I know, we had to do math.
To try to figure this out. So let's have a little fun here. This might be a little nerdy on air, but let's have a little fun here. All right? The average NFL offense, let's say, runs 60 to 65 plays, somewhere around that NFL game. So let's just go with the round number of 60, all right?
Okay.
So if we do 60 plays total on the offensive side of the football, we assume they're going to run a similar scheme to Ben Johnson, right?
Right.
The Chicago Bears last season passed the ball on 54% of their snaps, which was 24th in the league, 54.2%.
So how many per game was that?
So that would be, if we're doing 60, if we're working off that,
okay,
32 and a half.
32 and a half.
So 32, 33. So if we work off of the premise that they're going to drop back 32, 33 times a game, and then we consider that Jaden is probably going to take off and run 2 or 3 times in that same sense. So now we're getting right around 30 pass attempts for him, maybe a little bit less.
For design runs or scrambles?
Scrambles.
Scrambles, okay.
That would take away from because the design runs would go under run plays.
Right.
So this would work as scrambles. So let's say he scrambles 3, 4 times a game. So let's just make it a round number and make it easy. 30 pass attempts a game.
Okay.
And it probably is going to be less than that, I would assume. Because that's 30 dropbacks. That's no sacks involved. A third of your passing game is going to Terry McLaurin. I love that. I'd be psyched.
Sounds good.
Sounds great to me. But do you think that's plausible? Do you think it's realistic to think that they're going to be able to get him 10 targets a game?
One, I don't think it's realistic because it's something they've never done in his career. And I know Blau says, this is our best receiver. Correct. That is a fact. If you want to win football games, you need to make sure that Terry McLaurin is getting the football at adequate amount. But he's not going to be the only guy that's going to get open on any given occasion. And if you're running this new pro-style offense where we expect them to run the ball a little bit more, get under center, and have the tight end be heavily involved the way we saw it with Colston Loveland last year for the Bears. But I also like to think back to even 2024, and I know it's the Cliff Kingsbury offense here in D.C., but the rookie season of Jane Daniels. I really do like the idea of getting your running backs involved in the passing game, using them as the safety valve. I think that was really important for Jaden in his rookie season, having a reliable option as a pass-catching running back like you got in Austin Eckler. And Eckler, in that season, he had 41 targets, 35 receptions. So it was like a reliable option. Most of the time where Jaden targeted Eckler, he was open. Now you have Rashad White, like a buddy of Jaden, college teammate of him. That fits into the equation here. Jerome Ford, I guess, could also fit into that role, whether or not he makes the roster because they drafted Katron Allen. That'll all remain to be seen. Jeremy McNichols as well. But with that being the case, and then the addition of Chigakonkwo, getting Terry to 10 per game is not going to be easy because I think you're going to try to find a Okonkwo underneath and give him opportunities to be explosive after the catch. That's what they've been missing from this tight end position, this group, for the last couple of seasons. Zach Ertz did his thing at age 34, came in a serviceable veteran until the torn ACL, obviously very unfortunate in Minnesota. But he wasn't, there's a reason his name was No Yak Zach. You're not getting the same thing with Chigakonkwo. There's a reason they brought this guy in specifically because they want the football in his hands so they can make plays after the catch. And if that's going to be the basis of your offense is having guys that are explosive after the catch, I don't see McLaurin being able to get 10 every single game. Will there be games where he gets 10? Maybe. That's why I love McLaurin so much down in the red zone. If you're getting all of these red zone opportunities, you better be throwing him the ball often because this is your best contested catch guy on the team, one of the best guys at the catch point in the entire league. But he should get the football a ton. Is 10 a stretch? Maybe.
So, in his career, the most targets he's gotten in a game or in a season was 2020. His second season in the league, he got 134. 2023, in 17 games, he got 132 targets. So that calculates out to 7.6. In the rookie season with Jaden Daniels, he got 117. That calculated out is to just under 7. So you're talking about him trying to up this by upwards of 30-40%.
That's
in
a
terms
lot.
of trying to get him the football.
It's a lot.
And targeting him. It is a lot. And I think there might be a little bit of hyperbole throwing out a number. Hey, we're going to get him the ball 10 times a game. Like, there might be a little bit in there. For instance, we haven't seen Terry be able to do this, get targeted that much. He's not your prototypical number one receiver.
Right.
In his career, his yards per target is 8.9. If you were to get him 10 targets a game, so you just do 10 times 17 times 8.9, you end up with 1,500 plus yards at 1,513. I don't see Terry going for 1,500 yards.
Right. This isn't Jamar Chase, who had double-digit catches 5 times last season. That's rare. That's not a normal receiver. Like that's a bona fide number. He's the best receiver in the NFL for a reason. Like, you're not expecting that out of McLaurin. And McLaurin is their number one guy, and I think he's incredible, and I think he's very valuable with what he provides for this team and why he should be Jaden's top target, and he will be Jaden's top target, given, if he's on the field this year. And I think the injury stuff last year was a little bit fluke, I would say, for McLaurin. I know, he had the holdout from training camp and then wasn't able really to get back to himself. Then he had the quad injury against the Raiders and then had it once again against the Chiefs. I think you're expecting a completely different season in terms of health for McLaurin, which is going to be very important for him. Now going to be his age 31 season, right? But it's not really normal to say, this guy will get 10 targets per game just because it's something that hasn't happened in his career and what they have around him offensively right now. I know they're still looking for who will be that second option. Offensively, are they going to bring in a guy like Brandon Ayuk or Stephon Diggs? I know that's still up in the air right now, but based on what we know they have, I still think that's not going to be an easy number to get to. And like you said, hyperbolized a little bit makes sense. But bottom line, the focus should be getting him as many targets as possible. And if that's the philosophy, no matter what that number is, I agree with it. Just try to get him the ball more.
So one thing that's interesting is I think his ADOT will come down, his average depth of target. I think he's going to get more targets a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, getting him the football, getting him involved, making sure that he gets his touches. So last year, his ADOT was 13.9. His first year with Jaden Daniels, it was 13.4. For context, again, working off of the Ben Johnson offense as like a premise, DJ Moore last season had an ADOT of 11.5. So I think you could see a little more of that style where, DJ Moore is more of a yak guy, a guy after the catch, and something that you're going to try to get him and let him be explosive. I think Terry can do a little bit of that, but I think there's going to be built-in simple stuff for him. I think they're going to want to use him in the traditional play action, drop back, throw the ball over the middle, the Shanahan-style stuff that you immediately think of when you think of Shanahan's scheme with the play action pass. I think they're going to try to use some of that stuff, but I also think there's just going to be simple stuff because I think David Blau's big thing when he's building this offense is making it easy for Jaden. And when Jaden has to go make his money on third down and in the fourth quarter, then Jaden has to go play Superman. But make it as easy as possible. So
stay ahead of the sticks.
1st and 10, if there's a guy playing off, let's throw a slant to Terry. Let's make this easy. It might not go for 25 yards. It might only go for 6. It might only go for 8 yards. It doesn't matter. Make it as easy as possible. So I think you're going to see more of that. Whereas in previous iterations of this offense with Terry, for whatever reason, there hasn't been this inclination of, hey, nothing's going well on offense right now. Let's just get the ball to Terry. We would talk about it all the time. The frustration that I would have with previous OCs when the offense would be doing nothing and Terry would have no touches and a half of football. You're like, well, what the heck are you doing? Just find a way, any way.
Yeah.
And not And my preference is not doing screens for that, but please just get the football in his hands. This team's better when number 17 is catching the football.
I did a data project my senior year of college, so this is the 2024 season, and what I concluded from it is that Terry historically has never been targeted a lot in the first half of games throughout his entire career, which is interesting because when he gets going, he becomes borderline unstoppable, and we saw that in a couple of instances in second half of these games. So why don't we make more of an effort in the first half early on to get the ball in his hands? I know sometimes he's the number one guy. He's been the number one guy, so it's not going to be easy for your offense to be just focused around him if the defense is bracketing or doing whatever is necessary to prevent him from getting the football. But I like the points that you bring up in terms of just getting stuff to him easy early in the game. 2024, coming off a 3-game losing streak, they played Tennessee at home. And I don't really care that much about this stuff, but one thing everybody had a problem with Cliff was to keep on lining Terry up on the left side of the field. First play of the game, they lined him up on the right side of the field. They threw it to him right away. Try to just get him going. He ended up scoring 2 touchdowns in the first half of that game. So if you can find ways to get him going early, make him more of a threat, then you can start to stretch the field vertically a little bit if you think he's going to be a threat underneath. They don't seem to make that a priority, or at least they haven't over the last couple seasons. So maybe that's something that changes a little bit here under David Blau. And I know the offense isn't going to be exactly the same as the way Ben Johnson does it in Chicago, but they were very balanced in terms of what they did with pass catching options. The highest receiving total they had was from Loveland at 713. They had 682 from Moore, 661 from Adunze. Burden had 652. None of those guys, except for Adunze, had 90 targets. It was pretty balanced in terms of who was getting the targets, who was getting the share of it. And maybe you could say that's the pitfall of Chicago because they don't have a guy like Terry who they can rely upon as much.
And what's interesting is maybe they don't have a Terry, but they also have 4 guys that are better than Washington's second option.
That's right, because that is kind of the option or the issue with Washington right now is like outside of Terry, then what?
Yeah, and that's where I think it's going to be interesting is finding where guys fit into a role. I think I can immediately picture what Chigakonkwo's role is going to be. He is going to be a guy that catches the ball underneath a lot. I don't think he's someone that is going to be in that Zach Ertz role. That's what they're going to have to find, by the way, is a little slept on, is who was that security blanket? It's 3rd and 4. Who can I turn to run that little angle route, to be open in the middle of the field? Even though Zach was not dynamic when he caught the football, at least he was able to always be reliable in those sorts of scenarios. So I'm curious to see who fits in there. Maybe Chig can fill that role, but
it's probably not Ben Sinnott.
Probably not.
At least I don't think it is. I'm still waiting on him to prove me wrong, but
I think
until I see something,
I think it could be Antonio Williams.
That's where I wanted to get into. Where does he fit in this equation? Because a lot of people have made the argument if you bring in a guy like Ayuk, all of a sudden you're kind of pushing Williams to the side for this year. I don't agree with that.
No,
I think he's going to be a very heavy feature in this offense.
I think you just brought it up in that Ben Johnson style scheme that they're going to be very even. So, yeah, maybe Williams, instead of going for 800 yards as a rookie, goes for 600, and that's fine.
Right.
I think you're looking at, you need another outside guy, because I don't think he's going to play as much outside as they want to let on. I think he's going to play in the slot. And I know that was some of the frustration for a lot of people when they drafted him. I'm sorry. Jalen Lane, really like him. He's a good punt returner. He hasn't told me that I can't draft a slot receiver by the way that he's played on offense. Same thing for Luke McCaffrey. So if I get a guy that can be instant impact, which I think Antonio Williams will be pretty much, if I can get a guy that's instant impact in the slot that I can rely on that can help me this season, sorry, dude, you got to go sit on the bench because I've got to get reliability at that position. But say you bring in an Ayuk, I think that changes how this offense works. I'm still kind of operating under the premise that until he's on this team, I can't necessarily fully break down the offense. But say he does, then he gives you the option of, all right, he's the 15-yard in behind the linebackers on the stuff. And Terry can run the deep route. Terry can run the drag. Terry can run everything. You can kind of use him as whatever you want to see him do on that specific play to feature him. And Ayuk becomes that typical X, whatever you want to call it, number one receiver where he's the guy that's running some of these routes over the middle of the field in that intermediate range and allow Terry to be that weapon. And then Antonio Williams fits in as the slot guy who's shifty, moves around the formation a little bit, and is, in my mind, I think he can be that security blanket if he has a good feel against zone. So I'm really interested to see if they do bring him in. But either way, I think Williams plays a pivotal role for this offense right away, regardless if they bring Ayuk in or not.
Right. I like what you're saying, and it's unfortunate that we're not going to get the answer on whether they bring in Ayuk or not. But, I mean, we're creeping up on June 1. Isn't that when a lot of people think if Ayuk's going to get released, it's going to happen, or can it actually stretch out longer toward camp?
This thing could stretch throughout camp.
And I'm not really interested in that.
No.
I want this guy to be in the building learning the offense now.
That's where I think they dropped the ball this offseason.
He should have been here now, is the thing.
Well, you can't do anything about that.
But
you're not going to trade for him.
Absolutely not. But that's why I would have just looked elsewhere.
Correct.
Absolutely. I'm not interested in Brandon Ayuk anymore.
Absolutely.
And I don't think I've been interested in him for a while.
No, I mean, I'm going to be out at OTAs on Wednesday. I need Ayuk here soon. Like, you're starting to get into the point, like, mini camp's coming up in a couple of weeks. Like, you're getting to the point now where you're starting to do football stuff. Like, hello, you need to get this ball rolling. Because didn't you see last year
what
how
happened?
Out of sync this team looked when people weren't there? So to think that you're just going to bring in Ayuk and plug him in and he's suddenly going to be fine, he's got to learn a new offense too.
He's got to learn how to play the sport. He hasn't played the sport in 2 years.
Yeah, so I'm kind of out on Ayuk. Stephon Diggs is interesting. Seems like Stephon Diggs is going to bring what Stephon Diggs brings in terms of some of the extra stuff. But on the football field, everybody in New England talks super highly about what he brought to that team last year. I'd be considering that.
I'm way more in on Diggs right now than I am Ayuk. And if you would have told me 6 months ago, would you be interested in bringing Stephon Diggs here next year? I would have told you hell no. But right now, with the way it stands and what options are left, I'm all in on Stephon Diggs, out on Brandon Ayuk right now.
So one thing I'm going to get into next, because I think it's interesting with this. If they don't do anything, I think you have to build your offense where Terry gets 10 targets a game. I think you have to.
I like that point.
If you don't bring anybody else in, who are you throwing the ball to? Would you rather just go ahead and give Luke McCaffrey 6 targets a game? No. Just get the ball extra Terry McLaurin. Let's talk about that next. Terry McLaurin could be getting 10 targets a game. That's what David Blau said earlier this offseason. They want to build the offense around making sure they get Terry targets. What does that look like? Do you think that is plausible? And also, do you think that maybe we don't have to worry about this because they're going to bring in a legit second option in Brandon Ayuk or Stephon Diggs? 800-636-1067. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober in for the Junks on Memorial Day.
Says he wants to get you 10 targets a game.
I love that. I love that. You know, he told me that way back in February. He texted me that him and I have a really good relationship, and you know, he's been a man of his word. And you know, my job is to prove that each and every day when we're having workouts to be the leader, to be someone you can count on to be on the field and make plays. And that's all I've been asking for. That's all I want. So to win games and have a big part of that. So I was definitely smiling when I saw that come across his phone, and you know, from OTAs and stuff, I could definitely tell that's going to be a part of it, along with the other guys as well. You know, there's going to be opportunities for me to take away coverage for Chig and for, you know, Trey and, you know, Bill and just so many other guys on our offense. So I think that's cool when you have a multiple offense that has multiple looks and formations, can make things look the same and marry together. It provides opportunities for everybody.
That's Scary Terry McLaurin, talking about what David Blau said earlier this offseason, that he wants to get Terry 10 targets a game.
Good to hear his voice, right?
Yeah. He's going to be around. Well, we heard his voice last year. We just didn't see him on the practice field early.
Hearing his voice wasn't a good thing in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, at least I'm not hearing about that at Eastern Motors. That was such a disaster last year.
And it was like things you never would have expected. Him to come out and be like, I'm very frustrated. It's not a good feeling. And you're like, whoa, is that this guy saying this?
I know.
At this point? Not like the last 6 years where he really could have been justified to say all of this because of how bad it was? I mean, it's crazy, but we're past that.
Hopefully we're past that.
Maybe.
Hopefully that's over with. 800-636-1067. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junkies here on Memorial Day. And you look at the offense right now, and you're trying to figure out exactly, you know, we were talking about this last segment about how you divvy up the targets to be able to get him 10. Is that something that's plausible? And if this offense were to stay the way that it is right now, I almost think you have to do it that way because he's your number one weapon. And if you want to make things easier on Jaden, well, then get it to your best weapon and scheme him open, scheme ways to get him the football. Not to say you're not going to get other guys involved, because I think you bring up some good points. I think Rashad White's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. I think they're going to find ways to get Chigakonkwo the ball. I think they're going to try to get other receivers involved. Antonio Williams, you heard him talk about Traylon Burks. You know, whether it's McCaffrey or Jalen Lane or, you know, even Bill getting involved in the passing game this year. They're going to find other guys to get involved. But your number one target in the passing game is going to be Terry McLaurin. Make sure that he gets the bulk of the targets so that way that your passing game can be the most effective because you're throwing it to your best player.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to the point that you bring up with having a guy in the building right now, if you're bringing in that option who's going to be your second fiddle alongside McLaurin. And if you don't have Ayuk in the building right now, you don't. You don't have Diggs in the building right now. OTAs this week and everything in between. We understand how being out of sync early in the season affected this team last season early on. And with what you have on the schedule right now, the first 7 weeks of the season, you have Philadelphia twice, one of the more formidable defenses you're going to face the entire season. Seattle, the reigning Super Bowl champs, one of the best defenses in the league, week 3. Dallas in week 2. Your season could be over really fast this season if you can't get things going early on. And if your offense is out of sync early in the season, then you might really be toast because the defense is still the very much unknown about this team right now. Obviously, they've made a ton of additions in free agency. They draft Sonny Styles with their 7th overall pick, but we don't know how good the defense can be. I think they'll be much better, but if they're not a top half of the league defense, how much are you relying on your offense? If you can't get that type of production that you need from your offense in the first 10 weeks of the season or whatever it may take for everybody to get going, your season's going to be over before Thanksgiving.
800-636-1067 if you want to hop in. One thing that makes this a little bit easier is if they're going to play from behind. It's a lot easier to get those targets if you're having to pass the ball more. So, to your point about having a defense that can be competent, help you out some, this team is going to try to limit the number of times they pass the football because I think they want to run the ball, control the game, because that's something that was slept on a little bit with what this team did when they went to the NFC Championship game.
Ran the ball really well.
They ran the ball and were able to control the game in terms of time of possession and all that. Now, the interesting part was second half of the year, it was Jaden was the run game.
Right. Postseason wasn't great running the football.
But they were at least able to find ways to maintain control of the game. Last year, that was not the case at all. This year, I think they're going to really build off of that run game. And something I'm excited to see, you heard Terry talk about it in that clip, marrying concepts so that you're working together. And you're going to run the same run look, and then you're going to pass out of that same look. You're going to do different things and try to make sure that you fooled the defense versus doing some of what Cliff did. I think this offense is going to be really good for Jaden Daniels, I think.
I do too. The pro style getting up under the center is very important for what they're going to do because they were a little bit too predictable in what they did out of the shotgun so often last year. And because they found themselves behind the stick so often, you were in very obvious passing situations. And when you're in that, when you're facing one of these elite pass rush groups like you're going to face in Philadelphia week 1, if you get in 3rd and long, you're in a really, really pretentious spot because you're going to let these guys on the edge pin their ears back and get to the quarterback really well. They're going to send blitzes at you. And I think one thing that they didn't do very well last year was pick up blitzes as well. I know you had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. One of the things they wanted him to work on a lot was how would he be in pass protection? Is that going to be better here in year number 2? You would hope so. And what's the load going to look like for Krosky-Merritt in terms of working out of the backfield? You didn't get Jeremiah Love in the draft, so it's reasonable to assume right now that Krosky-Merritt's going to take the bulk of the carries, be the number 1 tailback for this team. But there's something to be said about Katron Allen. I know you draft him in the 6th round, but that's a really hard runner. Is that going to become your goal line, your short yardage guy? That's kind of what it looks like right now. Is Rashad White going to fit in and get any carries for this team, or is he just going to be used as the safety valve out of the backfield? With the way they used Eckler, they were giving him carries early on in the season as well. So that's
their starting back.
Exactly. So that's something I think you have to account for here as well, is that White will probably get some of these carries. But if you want to be a successful team offensively next year, they're going to have to run the football well, be ahead of the stick. So when you're in these situations where it's not as obvious that you're going to pass the football, this is where you can start to do your damage if you're Jane Daniels. But I like the point you bring up. Pro-style offense, this should be much better for Daniels. One, just for his health, and just for the way the offense is going to flow throughout the course of a game.
Yeah, I'm curious how some of these guys are going to fit in terms of feel against zone, because you're going to see a lot of zone with Jaden Daniels and his running ability. So it's interesting to see how some of these guys are going to fit, because that is the role I was talking about at last segment. Zach Ertz was so savvy. You knew he wasn't going to be able to run after the catch, but his ability to just understand those sorts of coverages, where to sit down, the soft spots, I think that's going to be missed. And if there's not somebody that can step in immediately and have that same sort of feel, then you're going to really miss having that guy that you could rely on 3rd down, close to the goal line. I mean, how many times in Jaden's rookie season did they run that little out and in route to Zach Ertz? They clinched a playoff spot on that throw down at the goal line against Atlanta in Sunday Night Football in overtime. Those sorts of things I'm very interested in, and I'm hoping that Antonio Williams can grow into that Chigakonkwo, but do you get help from other tight ends? Does John Bates step into a little bit of a bigger role in terms of, obviously we know him as a blocker, but does he catch some pivotal spots? Can you get Ben Sinnott involved? You mentioned him last segment. Traylon Burks, where does he fit in?
Right.
They need other guys to step up in this offense big time because, like we're talking about, if they don't bring in Diggs, if they don't bring in Ayuk, which we still assume that, I would assume that you think that they'll probably bring in Ayuk.
It's what it sounds like. I'm not too thrilled about it, but that's what everybody thinks.
But if they don't do that, you've got to get Terry the football, and then you need other dudes to step up, because otherwise you're looking at a offense that, Fox Sports put out a ranking of supporting cast. They had them 28th to 32. And I don't know that that's all that crazy to rank them that low, because we're pretty high on Bill, I think, as a majority of fans here in the Burgundy and Gold. But nationally, they're like, okay, yeah, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, 7th rounder, whatever. Okay, Chigakonkwo is solid, but they're not thinking of him as Travis Kelce or anything. And then Terry McLaurin is the only guy that everyone nationally is like, oh, yeah, he's good.
Right. But if you run in the situation you did last year where he goes down, and that's what we keep on saying, you are one Terry McLaurin injury away from everything falling apart offensively. It's going to be very hard to overcome that type of injury with what you have right now. And I'm not saying other guys can't step up, but if you lose your main guy because everybody else is unproven to me right now, you wouldn't feel good about it. If there's an injury in camp, God forbid, to McLaurin, then all of a sudden you go into the season saying, oh boy, I mean, how are we going to score points?
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the issue I have with the way that they approach this offseason. If they went in with the idea that, okay, it's Ayuk and then we'll figure everything else out afterwards and that'll happen, but we just can't get it done right now, I think that's so faulty because of, like you talked about, early schedule. You need to come out of the gate hot, or you could end up putting yourself in a hole that you can't get yourself out of.
Mm-hmm.
2, what if that just doesn't happen? You can't bank on a guy being here
right.
that isn't here and is on another roster.
It's a make or break year for Dan Quinn in this group. After last year being unacceptable, you get to an NFC title game, year number 1, right? Last year's unacceptable. If your plan going into this season was relying on a guy that's not currently on your team and you're not sure when he's going to be on your team going into the season, I have a bit of an issue with that. Because if things stretch out and this doesn't even work out, and like, how much were you relying on Ayuk to be your second option anyway? Like, he is very unreliable, as it sounds to me.
He hasn't played football, to your point earlier.
He's coming off a major serious injury. We don't know what happened with his rehab last year. He is very unknown. If you could bring him in and he could be worthless.
Yeah.
He might not even be any good.
And again, that's part of what I have an issue with the way that Adam Peters went about this offseason is I know I can rely on Terry. I feel pretty good about Chigakonkwo being brought over. Passing game, so that's your top 2 targets in the passing game. What happens behind that?
Right.
It's not to say that Treylon Burks can't be good. It's not to say that Luke McCaffrey can't be better than what he was last season. It's not to say that Jalen Lane can't step up and help you out. It's not to say Antonio Williams can't do this as a rookie. But that's a lot of ifs.
Right. If you're banking on ifs, that's where you might run into trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mitch Tischler, I think, was the one that had this line last year. They expected the best, but didn't prepare for the worst.
Right.
And that's kind of what it feels like, where it's like, oh, yeah, I mean, we've got enough guys. One of them will step up. Well, what if no one does? Like, well, what if you end up in a spot and, God forbid, an injury? Like, that's where you put yourself in a tough spot. And what I do not want, and one of the discussions that I hated last year when we were talking about the Terry stuff was, oh, well, Jaden can get it done. I believe in Jaden. I believe he's a fantastic quarterback.
I do too.
I think by the end of this season, we're talking about him again. You know, we just had this top 10 discussion. I think he's squarely back in the top 10 after this season. I'm not worried about that. But what I don't want is him having to feel like he has to be Superman in a time when he's on a rookie contract.
Yes.
This is not... Like, if he had to do this when he's in year 8, well, that's what happens when you're getting paid
$70 million.
$70 million as a quarterback.
Then you ask for him to be that guy, to work with a little less around him. He's a third-year quarterback that missed a lot of time last year. I know he's, I guess, a little bit older than your average third-year quarterback. He's going to be 25 this year. But the NFL game is so different. There's a lot that you have to learn when you're playing at this position, and you got to have a good supporting cast around you. It's important. And I'm not trying to even knock down the guys that they have on this roster right now, because I do have like pretty high belief that Antonio Williams will be a pretty good piece for them. I like that draft pick a lot. I do love bringing in Chigakonkwo. I think he's going to help out this offensive ton. But just outside, in terms of production that you're getting from the wide receiver at the X position, outside of McLaurin, it gets a little bit dainty. And if you're at that point and then you have an injury or whatever else happens, or McLaurin is off for a day, he's not able to get open, you don't want Jaden to have to feel like he's going to be in a situation where, oh God, nobody's open. This is Seattle all over again. I got to scramble every single play. That's not sustainable. You can't do that.
Yeah, and hopefully the defense helps him out in that sense, but that's what I don't want, is I don't want it to end up in a spot again where everything's on Jaden. And I'm hoping that the scheme helps him out. But at some point, too, you know, you also got to help out your offensive coordinator.
Right.
He can only do so much. So that'll be an interesting thing. Can they get Terry those 10 targets a game? I think that they won't get to that number, but I do think that they'll get as close as possible, because I think right now, David Blau is kind of looking at it the same way I would and say, well, who the heck else do you want me to throw the football to? Let me get the ball to my best player, and we'll figure everything else out.
If you give me 8, I'm comfortable. I can live with that. If 8 is the average just because you have enough guys that are producing outside of him, I can definitely live with that. But if nobody else is producing and the number's 8, then maybe you're going, oh, that's not good. We're not looking too good offensively right now. But if you can do what Chicago did last year, where you have a bunch of guys be reliable for you as pass catching options, and then that means McLaurin gets a little bit less because other guys are producing that much more, then we're cool with that. Everybody understands. Terry would still be your top guy. You'd probably have him lead the team in touchdowns at that point, or maybe Chig does because he's like your reliable tight end option. But in a spot like the red zone, where being the best at the catch point, like McLaurin is, that's so valuable. That's where I want him getting the bulk of the targets. If they're going to target him anywhere a whole bunch of times, it's the red zone for me.
800-636-1067 if you'd like to hop in. Tobes and Strobes sitting in for the Junkies. We're talking Commanders on the Fan. Glenn Consor going to join the show coming up in about 12 minutes at 9 o'clock. Want to get his thoughts on the Wiz and what they should do with the first overall pick and what that team's going to look like next season, as it's going to be a fun era of Wizards basketball. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junkies today. Continuing to talk about the Commanders, you want to hop in 800-636-1067. You talked about the defense needing to be better, Strobes. How confident are you in that group? Because I think they've spent a lot of resources this offseason trying to improve that side of the football. And I'm really curious to see what they're going to be able to do, because I like some of the pieces they have over there. I like the scheme they're going to run on that side of the football. But do you actually think that it's going to be effective in year one?
I do like what they've done, considering the one thing that was the knock on them, at least in the middle of the field, was being really old and slow. They've gotten young and faster. We understand that. We've talked about that ad nauseum. What is this going to do for their pass rush? Are they going to be able to get to the quarterback at a high rate? Are they going to generate pressures? Because I think if you're going to have a successful secondary next year, you're going to have a really good pass rush that actually gets to the quarterback and gives you the production that you need at that position. You didn't get a bona fide edge guy necessarily in this draft. You get Joshua Josephs in the third round. Maybe he's going to be something for them. But like the possibilities you have of being a little bit creative with what you do at the linebacker position. Can you send Chenal at the quarterback, send Styles to the quarterback, Luvu, send him the way you did back in 2024 as opposed to last year, which wasn't quite good for Frankie Luvu. But I have a lot of questions about that secondary. I don't have as many questions about Trey Amos, who's going to come back from the leg injury. But outside of that, is Sainer still bouncing back? Amik Robertson is who you bring in free agency. Didn't grade very well last year for Detroit. Are they going to have issues once again in the secondary? Because if so, I don't know how much better defensively they'll be unless the pass rush is elite.
What I'm excited to see is how much are they going to run that looks like that Brian Flores scheme. I would assume that it's going to look pretty similar. And if that's the case, I'm really excited to watch this defense because they love using versatile players that can move around, do different things. And if seeing early returns or early action for them, a rookie minicamp, the way that they were just moving dudes around and mugging guys up to the line of scrimmage, they're going to do a lot of that stuff. Strobes, Minnesota runs a defense unlike anybody else. And so if that comes over here, it's going to be so different to watch this team. Last season, this team's blitz percentage was middle of the pack, 15th, at 27.5%. Minnesota was number one at 46.3%. That's more than 10% more than anybody else. The Falcons were number two at 36%. They run their own thing. They're going to blitz. They're going to have a bunch of dudes up at the line of scrimmage, and they're going to try to create havoc because you don't know who's coming. So who's dropping, trying to figure it out. Sometimes they're going to drop 8. Sometimes they're going to bring 7. Mm-hmm. Like, they're going to do all sorts of different things. And I think if it's effective and they can communicate well, you're right that it's going to be massive to help out that secondary because there's a lot of questions about some of the guys in that secondary. But I think this is the kind of a scheme where Mikey could be unlocked a little bit because this is the type of a scheme where it allows you to use some of those smarts, that football IQ, use your brain a little bit more to help you out on defense versus always relying on just mirroring the guy in front of you.
If you can get the opposing quarterback in a situation where he's throwing the ball under pressure, where he has to throw it up for grabs sometimes, this is where you find yourself in a much better position. Because one thing that the Commanders really struggled to do over the last season was generate turnovers. A big reason why they were able to win in the postseason was they came up with massive turnovers. They got 5 in the NFC divisional game against Detroit because they were able to get some pressure on Goff early in the game, and they were playing from behind, so they had to throw the ball a lot. If you get in situations like that, I feel like the defense, the success of it, hangs in the balance of what you do in the pass rush. And you could say they've done things to make sure that this pass rush is much more formidable this year. First of all, getting Dorrance Armstrong back is going to be big because he was playing at a 16-sack pace last season. Was that necessarily sustainable? I don't know, but I think he was going to be over double digits, which would have been pretty good for a guy like Dorrance Armstrong, who I don't think you necessarily need to rely on being your top guy. You went out and you spent your big splash money and to get Odafe Owe 4 years, $100 million. That's what you're going to have to bank on, is him being what he was in the second half of the season last year. And if Durante Jones can truly unlock a lot of the stuff that Jesse Minter was able to in Los Angeles, then I think you're sitting pretty with what you have on the edge. You got a little bit of depth as well, obviously. Charles Omenihu, who they signed from Kansas City, who would be on the line there as well. Like, are they going to get more production out of Kinlaw in the middle this year? Still have Deron Payne, who's now in a contract year. If that defensive line can, one, be formidable, setting the edge against the run, one is going to be important because every single outside run last year was a minimum 7 yards for the other team. It was the most frustrating thing ever to watch.
Right.
You need guys that can set the edge. And I know that Dietrich Wise was supposed to be that guy. You get him back this year after the injury last year, so maybe he helps out with that. They got to be able to play the run, and they got to put pressure on the quarterback, or else the secondary's in trouble.
I just like some of the athletes that they added. It's going to help out so much. Obviously, Sonny Styles is the headliner there, but Nick Cross being able to do some different stuff. Like, they're just going to have so much more at their disposal, and they're going to be able to use guys in different ways. And so I think Sonny Styles, to me, kind of unlocks a little bit more of what they wanted to do defensively. Because think about this defense if you don't have Sonny Styles. It's not that it wouldn't be good, and you could maybe throw in, like, if they would have taken an Arvell Reese, or if they would have gone offense and they didn't add any defender there. Like, I think that they still would have been fine.
Right.
But having a linebacker that can move around as fluidly as he does and do literally everything, I think it unlocks a lot more for what this defense can do.
Let me ask you a question then. If they would have got Mansour Delane, how would we feel about this? Because would you say, I think their secondary is going to be pretty buttoned up if you have Amos and then Delane on the outside, or are you in a situation where I'm still not that confident that they have enough versatility in the middle of the field that they have with Styles? Because Styles would have been my guy if I'm picking between those two. And I'm very, very excited that they got Sonny Styles at the 7th overall pick. But it's just interesting to think about. If their secondary was more polished right now, would people feel better about their defense for next season?
I'm sure that most people would. I'm just trying to think of this specific scheme, and they preach versatility. I mean, the first thing that Durante Jones mentioned when he was at his introductory press conference is he wants versatility from his players. There's no one more versatile in this draft class in terms of what they can do with their physicality, their size, fluidity, than Sonny Styles. So Delane would help out, no question about it. You want to have great corners anytime you can, but I think when you look at the scheme that the Vikings run, they're less dependent on corners than the other schemes. They're more dependent on having really good athletes, kind of hybrid types at the safety position and linebacker position, and being able to have guys that can do a little bit of everything off of the edge versus they don't have the elite corners. Think of like a Vic Fangio style scheme where you've got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and those guys. So having that versatility in the middle of the field, I think, is more important than the corners.
And the last point about Minnesota, what they do defensively under Brian Flores, they don't have a lot of household names in their secondary.
No.
You wouldn't point to any of those guys and say, yeah, that's a star player. Like maybe like if you're a guy that knows a lot of ball, you'd say, yeah, he's a good player, he's a solid player. But they don't have like formidable star level players in that defensive backfield. They rely a lot on the pressure they generate on the quarterback. And if Washington can do the same thing, maybe you don't need to worry about having bona fide stars in your secondary.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Harrison Smith is the headliner of those, but he's more, at this point in his career, the cerebral player more than the dynamic safety that he'd been throughout his career. All right, let's talk to Glenn Consor. Want to get his thoughts on the Washington Wizards. We'll do that next. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junks on Memorial Day. Final hour of the Junks. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junkies today. No better way to kick off the final hour than getting out to the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude, the most reliable heating and air conditioning products in the DMV. Welcome in our guest, Glenn Consor from Wizards Radio. Glenn, what's going on? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How you guys?
Doing well.
Can't complain, Glenn. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Curious to get your thoughts about this. So much of the discussion around the Wizards and this winning the NBA draft lottery has been trades, these different things. Isn't there just something to just sticking and picking, being able to get your guy and figure out who you're going to build around and not worry about any other scenarios and just taking your guy?
You know, it's so intriguing because you have to do your due diligence before you make any selection. And that means interview a ton of players, think about how many players you can get if you make a trade. But I kind of agree. I think there's so many good players in this draft that could turn into very good NBA players that, you stick with your guy and take it. So I'm kind of leaning towards doing that. And, you could dangle it out there and see what you can get. But, how many NBA teams are willing to give up another great player for an unknown? To me, for example, you're going to give up one of your high draft picks that you picked the year before that could turn into a really good player for one player, and you're giving up 2 for 1. I'm not sure if I'm that team that I would do that. So I would stick with the player.
When it comes to positional flexibility, we understand that's something Washington, Will Dawkins, and Michael Winger have been really accustomed to building here in terms of what the roster is and what type of guys you have on this team with length and the ability to kind of stretch guys around on the floor, whether it's Sar hybrid between the 4 and the 5, Keyshawn who can kind of play 2 through 4 right now. If Debonsa at 1 is your guy, what does that mean for this team in terms of positional flexibility? How creative can they be with a lot of the other guys on this team if Debonsa is the pick?
Yeah, I think it just adds value to their creativity. I mean, they're all the same. Debonsa is a guy that can play multiple positions, can defend multiple positions, like a Bilal Coulibaly, like Keyshawn George, like the rest of the good young players that the Wizards have. So I think he fits in beautifully. Look, he's a shot maker. I think in this draft, between Debonsa and Peterson and Boozer and Caleb Wilson and Wagler and Acuff, those guys are only going to make NBA teams better because they're versatile. And, they're going to fit in beautifully with really any team in the NBA.
Yeah, I think you look at this draft class, and it's just so deep, and there's so many good players. But Peterson and Debonsa are kind of the top 2 guys. But off of what Ben just talked about there, Glenn, when you look at the way that the modern game is played in the NBA, doesn't it feel like trying to just add more depth to the wing where, Debonsa, it would be big to play the 2, but it's not unheard of for guys his size and with that style to play the 2. And to have that flexibility, isn't that more important in the modern game than maybe it's been probably over the last 15, 20 years?
Totally agree with you guys. Because look at OKC. What is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? You talk about, let's throw the numbers game back into the equation, which now it's out of the equation. Numbers don't exist. Oh, I'm going to play the 1. I'm going to play the 2. I'm going to play the 3, 4, 5. Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. In
the NBA. So what's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? What is he? All these guys. You only can make a case maybe for Brunson, who's playing a scoring 1. Even you could throw the combo guard. He's a scoring 1. So, what's Josh Hart? What is he? You look at all these guys. What's
what's Mikal on the Knicks? What is he? All these guys are so multifaceted, multi-skilled that they could play multiple positions. And I think that, you look at this year's draft, Ben and Toby, it's loaded with point guards.
Yeah.
Well, those point guards are going to have to play multiple positions now in the NBA because of the way the NBA game is played. And I love this year's draft. It's so intriguing to me because it's so heavy with point guards like Wagler and Acuff and Brown and Flemings and Burries. There's so many guys. And guess what? The Banta could play one. Peterson could play a one. You could make a case that Boozer's so skilled at what he does on the floor that he could play a little one. I'm exaggerating there. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Keaton Wagler could end up being the best player in this draft. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just kind of happy that, we're not having those debates, whether it's Acuff or Wagler. I think the Wizards are definitely happy to be in the position, whether you're taking DeBonsa or Peterson or Boozer, whichever your pick is of one of these guys. So you mentioned how in the NBA right now, the way the game is played, it's positionless almost. But the one thing the Wizards do have is a real point guard on this team in Trey Young right now. Whether or not he's going to be around long-term remains to be seen. But what we know about Trey Young, what we saw in the 5 games of him in a Wizards uniform, no matter who the pick is, just having his presence, his ability to play make, how much is that going to raise this team's floor next year?
Oh, tremendously. Look, how many guys can you say led the NBA in points and assists? Not many. Nate Archibald comes to mind. And that was way before you guys were born. I had to throw that in there. But, he's that good. I mean, he could score. He could play make. He has a unique acumen. I think very similar to what we're seeing right now in Jalen Brunson, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. If you need a guy to have 12 assists in a game, depending on how the game is playing out and how the defense is playing him, he'll get his 12 assists, like Shai did the other night. If you need him to get 30, he can get 30. So, he will take what defenses give him. He's that good. And there's not a lot of players in the NBA that you could say that about. But he is that good to make everyone else around him better, but also give a team a scoring punch. Because he's a deep 3 shooter, he could stretch the floor. The fact that he could make threes at where he shoots from, in his range, you know what that's going to do to guys like Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr and the rest? I mean, it's just going to open it up completely and make it easier. Their lives are going to be a lot easier when he's on the floor.
Talking with Glenn Consor, Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junks today. You mentioned Keyshawn and Alex Sarr, and one of my favorite parts about watching the Wizards this season was seeing their development from year 1 to year 2. How about the guys that were the rookies this season, where you saw Trey Johnson, you saw Will Riley, you saw Jameer Watkins? What do you think a year 2 jump looks like for those guys, and how much more impactful year 2 they can be versus, they were impactful year 1, but how much more impactful they can be in their second season?
Yeah, it's going to, the dramatic improvement from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, where all 3 of those guys you just mentioned, Trey, Will, and Jameel, was just amazing to me. I always get people coming over to me saying, whether I'm doing radio or TV, they come over and say, how do you do these games? The Wizards are losing. We talk so much as analysts on the development of these young players, not just the 3 rookies, but all these second-year players as well. Mm-hmm. All have gotten so much better than they were early on. I think Trey Johnson really showed that he's more than just a shot maker and a shooter, is that he can defend and he can play make. He's a very good passer. He showed that. Will Riley, to me, might have been the steal in the whole draft class last year. He might have been the biggest steal because of what he has shown, his acumen to score, his ability, his footwork, to get around people and pivot. Look, these guys all got to put on weight, maybe with the exception of Jamil. But and I love Jamil on defense, but he also showed that he could shoot, which he didn't show in the beginning of the year. So all these guys took steps in the right direction in improving their deficiencies during the game. And all the young players on the Wizards, you got to think about their age. They don't have bodies yet. It's amazing to me. People forget they're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Look at Wemby. Wemby doesn't have a body yet, and look what he's doing. Now, he's, an alien. We know that.
Yeah, he's
but
different.
He doesn't have strength yet. He doesn't have it. Will Riley doesn't have it. He's going to naturally develop. Your body doesn't really kick in until you're 24, 25, 26 years old. And some of these guys are going to be late bloomers depending on their body type. But Trey's going to get stronger. Jamil's going to get stronger, and he came into the NBA defensive ready. So when all these guys get stronger, it's going to lend to the improvement of everything that they're doing, defense, offense. Because I tell you what, I give credit, to Will Riley and Michael Winger because they've drafted guys with just tremendous upside that are continuing to get better. And when they put this body weight on and strength, you got yourself. And they're always talking about we want sustained success. We want that. Well, you might have it because of the way they have drafted so far. Alex Sarr put on weight from year 1 to year 2. Look how much better he was in his second year because of his strength and because he made the adjustment as a foreign player to the NBA game in pick and rolls and his awareness on the roll and his welcoming of contact when he catches it in the paint. He doesn't avoid contact like he was in his first year. He made that jump.
Right.
All these guys are making that jump.
Talking with Glenn Consor here, analyst for Wizards Radio. You mentioned a lot of these young players that showed things in their first couple of years here in the association where we understand where the Wizards are heading right now as an organization, trying to take that next step and be in some more competitive basketball games and ultimately win more games. Michael Winger himself said on Ryan Russillo's podcast that a lot of these minutes aren't going to be handed out the same way they were over the last couple of years when they were deconstructing. Just how competitive is this group going to have to be for minutes next season? Do you see anybody that you expect to rise and find themselves heavy in the rotation? Are guys going to fall out? Where are we looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, it's on them. It's going to be on them. It's going to be hard to predict that. That's a tough question to answer because, this is what you want. You want guys to compete for minutes. And quite frankly, this is what a rebuild looks like. The deconstruction stage and phase is over. Now, this is the turn in a rebuild. This is what the turn looks like when guys are competing for minutes, when combinations of players, you're going to be looking at combination of players that are going to win games and close out games. Who could play together? Is it Keyshawn and Alex? Is it Trey and Keyshawn? All those little things they'll be looking at to win games. So, again, this moment coming up this season with the Wizards is going to be about the turning point of this rebuild. And that is going to be based on how guys compete for minutes.
Glenn, my big concern about this whole thing is when you play the way the Wizards have played the last couple of seasons, we understand what they were trying to do, and it's worked now, obviously having the number 1 overall pick. But, defensively, they've struggled for years. And I always wonder when you're going from being a team, where they've had Anthony Davis has voiced these concerns about going from a team that's one of the worst in the NBA to trying to compete for a playoff spot. Can you just flip a switch defensively and suddenly, because they've got guys like Sarr, Davis, Koulibaly, George, like they've got good defenders. Do you think this is something that next season, when they're going to have clear aspirations of trying to be a much better basketball team, that you can flip that switch and improve defensively, or is that something that's going to be a work in progress for a couple of seasons?
Yeah, I don't think you could flip a switch in any aspect of the game of basketball, but I think what you're seeing, you guys watching the finals, the conference finals?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Both of you guys are watching it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What jumps out at you about defense?
Intensity so much bigger.
Intensity and physicality.
Yeah.
The physicality on the perimeter, the physicality in the low post, the physicality as a team, as a unit, the chemistry of the physicality. Like, to me, Cleveland has lost that a little bit. Now, they got one, they still have another game to breathe life into their series, but, they've lost a little bit of that physicality on defense. Well, every team, San Antonio and certainly OKC, those guys get after you on defense because they have the body types to do it. I think when the Wizards as a group begin to put on weight and get stronger and add physicality and add that physical body to their defensive games, they will get better because the effort will be there. All these guys, the amazing thing to me, why I'm so optimistic on this team, is the character of these players. No one's got an agenda on this team of all these young players, and you can't say the same with the rest of the league. These guys play for each other. They want to win. They like each other. They work on their games. They're gym rats. That's the type of guys that Will and Mike have drafted, all of them. And they're workaholics. They're ballers. And they're gym rats. So they know they got to get stronger. But you need that physicality. Anthony Davis, obviously, is going to be one of those guys that is going to bring it. But all those guys are going to get stronger. The team's going to look different, I think, defensively next year because, players are made in the summer. Players play in the winter, but they're made in the summer. So hopefully these guys will come back stronger, and they'll be built like Ben Strober. Just like, they'll play bully ball.
Right. I hope everybody's not built like a 5'6" ginger, but
Wizards defense might be in trouble if they all look like Strobes.
Glenn, I got one I want to get you out on here. With Brian Keefe, he returns as the head coach for the Wizards. You and I have had conversations about the idea of connectivity and, how hands-on he is as a head coach and how he's been the guy, the voice of the team over the last 3 seasons with these young players. How important do you view that continuity of bringing Keefe back here in a kind of different situation the last couple of years have been? Was that really important for him to be back as their guy?
I really think so. I mean, the players like playing for him. He gets development. He's worked with Russell Westbrook. He's worked with Kevin Durant. He understands player development. And look, you look at this team over the last 2 years. What are you going to get in here? Someone who's just going to be, there's so many coaches out there that could not relate to a team this young. Brian Keefe can. And I think he's done a phenomenal job. And I think not just Brian, but the coaching staff, the development staff, all those guys have done an amazing job getting these guys better. Like I said earlier on, look how much better they are now than they were 2 years ago with the second-year players. 1 year ago when the rookies came in. That's a tribute to Brian Keefe and his staff. So I think you got to keep that and keep that going. And I like what Brian's done. It hasn't been easy for him. Hasn't been easy for anybody. But I think, from a player development standpoint, he's got it down. And these guys, all you want is these guys to continue to get better and grow.
Well, Glenn, appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
You too, guys.
Thank you.
Have a
That's
good one.
Glenn Consor joined us on the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude, the most reliable heating and air conditioning products in the DMV. Let's keep the Wizards talk going. You want to hop in 800-636-1067. Let's talk a little bit about Anthony Davis. I don't know where some of these ideas around, they can trade Davis and get a good haul back. I don't know where some of those ideas are coming from. Let's talk about that next here on the Junkies. Welcome back, Tobes and Strobes, sitting in for the Junks here on Memorial Day. Talking about the Washington Wizards. Want to hop in, 800-636-1067. So I want to talk about this Anthony Davis situation, Strobes. One of the things that I think is hilarious and just always fun and is what makes being a fan fun, especially when it comes to the NBA, because no league does rumors and trade rumors and all that stuff better than the NBA. One of the things that I think is hilarious is how many Wizards fans think that the Wizards could actually get something for Anthony Davis when they traded next to nothing for Anthony Davis.
It's so good. It's so funny how many accounts and reporters, and I'm doing air quotes here, exist that make these kinds of rumors saying that so-and-so player is very interested in going elsewhere. This team is interested in pursuing him. But the bottom line with Davis, if you look up his basketball reference page, I'm not even exaggerating, I'm looking at it right now, they have a little sidebar where they have nicknames for a player. Unibrow, The Brow, AD, Ant, Street Clothes. Street Clothes made his basketball reference page. He didn't play in more than 5 games in a row.
That's so tough.
In his time in Dallas. So that's why his value is low right now. Not because he's not a good player. He's obviously an incredibly good player. He averaged 20.4 and 11.1 rebounds when he was on the floor for 20 games last season. It's a 10-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA guy. But he's not on the floor a whole lot right now. And the Wizards are hoping they can rekindle that value by him playing for the team, him helping Sar develop, and him winning us some games. That is how his value is going to increase. It's not going to magically increase because somebody made up a trade rumor saying they want him.
Well, and that's what I think is so funny is like if they want to get something in return, something that helps them, you're not going to be able to trade him before the season for anything of note.
Exactly.
Like, he's going to have to play games for this team if they want to get anything in return for him. You traded next to nothing for him. So that's not how this works. You trade for a damaged asset and then trade said damaged asset for something good. It's not how it works. So he's going to have to play games for this team, and that's where I never understood the idea that he just won't be on the team to play. What are you going to do? Like, why would you trade for the guy to not then have him play on the team? Like, I don't see a world in which he doesn't at least play at least a little bit for the Wizards this upcoming season.
The only argument I've heard that I guess I kind of understand, I'm not really that interested from this aspect, and I think Danny brings up this point actually a good amount. When you have these superstar type of players, he's saying good things about the organization right now. Not necessarily that they're a good basketball team yet, because they're not. In fact, he's been on record saying as much that they are a bad basketball team right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we get it. But he said the good things about the management that they have here, the facilities, and the other things that are important for making Washington become a destination going forward. So I think some of the points that people have made, you want to do right by these players and show that you treat these players well so that other superstars, other distressed assets in the future will make Washington a preferred destination, kind of the way Trey Young has. But with Davis, I don't see the need to have any allegiance to that because if anything, Washington can do him a favor by keeping him around, having him play well with this team through the deadline. And if he's playing really well, he stays relatively healthy because they manage his minutes right. If a contender comes calling at the deadline next year, maybe they have an injury or they just feel like they need some help in the front court defensively or offensively because Davis still can play pretty damn good offensively right now at age 33, then you could have a legitimate contending team that calls and says, we're interested in AD. And I think that's what he wants right now, is he wants to play for a contending team. I think he also wants to get that one more lucrative payday. We understand that. So I think a lot of the stuff that he said is him trying to angle saying, if you want me to be around for whatever length of time it takes for this Wizards team to become a contending team, I'm going to have to be here on long-term type of money. But I don't think the Wizards would be smart to give him a long-term contract right now. It just doesn't make any sense given his injury history.
One of the things that threw me for a loop in there is you said he's only 33. It feels like he's older than that.
Well, I mean, because he's hurt so much.
Because he's always broken down. But he's such a good player when he plays. That's the issue for him, is like when he's on the floor, he can still help you. You laid it out. He's a 20 points a game, 8 or 11 rebounds, something like that. Like every single time he steps on the floor. Like when he plays, he can still be an effective player and he can really help you out. I think with this team, let's just assume he stays and plays here. how fun is this matchup or him in this lineup with Trey Young and him running a pick and roll? Add in whoever they take at number 1. You've got Trey Johnson as a great shooter. Him and Sar together in the front court in the paint, that makes one of the best shot blocking duos in the league. I mean, that's a fun pair to have.
And for a team that's been irrelevant over the last couple of seasons, especially as they've deconstructed the roster and lost a ton of games, with this lineup, if AD is here on opening night, which I anticipate he will, the number 1 pick, and Trey Young, they're legitimately playing on national TV probably for their first game of the season because they have the number 1 pick, of course. But there's novelty to that because you're going to be playing at home in front of probably a good crowd at Cap One Arena with formidable stars, guys that fill seats. Like AJ DeBonsa says he fills seats. Yeah, he'll fill seats. Davis will fill seats if he's playing. Trey Young, box office guy as well. Just to have those guys introduced in the starting lineup for your team on opening night next year, that will get people excited about this team. And it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. I think Davis can help this organization out in a mountainous way. I think he can do a ton for them in terms of their development, playing alongside Sar, because the one thing the Wizards haven't done over the last 3 seasons, the last 2 here specifically with Sar, is run multiple bigs in the same lineup. That just hasn't been something they've done. So floor spacing becomes a little bit of an issue. There's a lot of opportunities where Sar, he's blocked a lot of shots, but he's had to defend such an absurd amount at the rim, way more than anybody else in the league, because there's been no resistance whatsoever outside of that, playing at the 4 position. So if you're putting Anthony Davis playing at the 4, which is where Wenger anticipates he would play, and Sar playing the 5, that's legitimately a very, very strong defensive front court right now. And you're going to need that if you're trying to win games next year, because Trey Young is your biggest deficiency defensively at the 1.
Well, and that's the fun part about that, too, is when you've got Trey Young, Trey Johnson, who can be liabilities defensively. Say you draft AJ DeBonsa, who also, until he
proves
picks
otherwise,
up his defensive game, could be a liability defensively. Like, you're going to at least be able to help them out. But the reality, too, is when you trot out on opening night, whether you take Peterson or DeBonsa, you've got Trey Young, Anthony Davis, that's legitimately 3 20-point potential scorers right there. 3 of them in the same starting lineup. That's not including whoever else you want to throw in there, whether it's Keyshawn George, whatever it is, guys that took major strides. It's going to be a fun basketball team next year. And it's one of those things that they're not a finals contender, but there's no reason why that team shouldn't be able to compete for something. Like, play in bare minimum, at least competing for it.
That's the floor.
And that's the thing. That's the floor. When's the last time we were excited about a team and we're talking playoffs?
It's been a while, because the last time this team was in the postseason was 2021, kind of an abbreviated season, started a little bit late because of COVID, obviously, and that was the first year of the non-John Wall era. They traded for Russell Westbrook, who had his record-breaking moment and all that stuff here. It was good and fun, a rookie season for Denny Avdia. But everybody knew there was no chance after they won in the play-in. They were winning anything in the first round, going against the 1 seed in Philadelphia, and it ended up being a gentleman's sweep. I think if this team can get into the postseason as a top 6 seed, which if you have health for Anthony Davis for the majority of the season, Trey Young and DeBonsa or Peterson, whoever they draft number 1, can be as good as advertised. You get substantial leaps from your guys you'd expect in their 3rd season here, Sar, George, Coulibaly in your number 4. I think you're looking at a team that can make maybe a little bit more noise than people understand is possible in the Eastern Conference, because it's not that good. It's competitive, but it's not that good. If the Wizards can jump a couple of these teams, then they find themselves in the thick of things. They're not going to win a championship next year. We understand that. But if you're taking that step forward, getting to the postseason and getting these young guys real postseason experience, that is a huge, huge step forward to them becoming where they want to be within 2 to 3 years.
I go back to what I asked Glenn about, and this is the thing that I'm going to struggle with, is how do you go from a team that has been what it's been the last couple of years, and especially on the defensive end, to all of a sudden being able to play defense at a respectable level? Because it's not like they don't have good defenders. We just talked about Davis and Sar could be a really good shot-blocking duo. Keyshawn George is a good wing defender. Bilal Coulibaly, that's kind of his calling card at this point now, is a really good defender. I know they've got some liabilities, but the amount of times they're giving up stupid amounts of points on a night-in, night-out basis, I do think there is something to be said for, hey, we're going to be trying to compete for something. The effort might pick up a little bit, whatever it may be. But I don't think you just go from a team that allows 120 a night to all of a sudden playing better defense and winning ball games. So that's the one thing that worries me about trying to take that step is, are you just going to be able to flip that switch and suddenly play defense, or is it going to be one of those things where, hey, the offense looks great, but they still can't stop anybody?
It'll be an adjustment period for sure. And the one thing I'll push back with that, based on what Will Dawkins said at his exit interview, it sounds like they didn't run a whole lot of team-oriented concept stuff defensively over the last couple seasons because they've prioritized this jump season and players making individual strides as a player. And we've seen some of that with Sarr protecting the rim. Maybe he has some of his other deficiencies right now because he hasn't grown into his body, as Glenn mentioned. But if the focus has been so heavy on individual stuff, they've allowed for players to make a lot of mistakes and continue to make those mistakes because they can afford to do so at that point in time. Now that you're entering this era where you can't afford to make these mistakes, and Michael Winger said as much, we're going to have little to no tolerance for people making the same mistakes over and over again. So if that's the case, how much more team-oriented defensive stuff are you implementing with Brian Keefe, who's supposed to be a defensive guy? I think it'll take time to adjust to it, but it's going to look different than it did last season. I don't know how much better that makes it, but that is one thing that I kind of float around in the back of my head right now.
Want to talk briefly about Trey Young. We'll do that to wrap up the show next. Also want to talk briefly about what we're going to have for Memorial Day to celebrate as we remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom here in this country. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the Junks on Memorial Day here on The Fan. Final couple minutes of the Junkies. Tobi Altizer, Ben Strober sitting in for the guys today on Memorial Day. We'll turn it over to AWOD next here on The Fan. But first, want to continue talking about the Wizards. Trey Young, I think, is another interesting part of this, Strobes, where we talked about Anthony Davis. I don't know that his plans long-term fit with the Wizards, but it does sound like there's a chance that Trey Young could be a part for at least the next couple of seasons. Do you like that move? I mean, we had Bobby Marks on Grant and Danny last week. He was talking about a potential contract that he would offer that would be 3 years, would essentially buy out the player option and then give you 2 additional years. Is that something you'd be in favor of? Because I actually think that of the two guys, Davis and Trey Young, I think he fits more with what this team needs.
Absolutely. I think the expectation for a while, for me at least, is that he gets the extension. If you give him this thing where you go 3 years, you have a player or club option on that third year, a descending contract as well, that makes a bit of sense. One, because right now you have a young nucleus of players on this team that are on their rookie contracts. You don't have to worry about extending any of these guys at least until next year for some of them. Right now, Koulibaly is the only one that's extension eligible of your young crop of players right here. So if you get him on this contract that's descending, coming down in value, over the last couple years of his contract, that'll make a little bit more sense, because when you start to have to pay guys like Altizer, like Keyshawn George, like Trey Johnson, when they get into that stratosphere where you start after talking about, having them around on a rookie extension, whatever that money will look like at the time, it'll make more sense that his contract value, and talking about Trey Young, is coming down at the time. I think you can be flexible with what you're doing in terms of your cap. And we understand Trey Young is not a $50+ million player anymore. And I think he understands that he is not that player at this point in time. But the reason he was so interested in being in DC, because he understood how necessary he would be for them taking their next step forward and what his value is to this team. And with that being said, I think it makes sense for the next 2 to 3 seasons to have him be the stability that you need offensively at the point guard position. He's going to make everybody around him a lot better right now. And that's the one thing they severely lacked over the last couple of seasons, where you have young players who are trying to find their footing, get their feet wet in this league. They didn't have a true distributor on the roster to clear space up for them, make plays for them, get them open shots. And it was visible in the 5 games that he played last year, what type of gravity he brings to the offense and what it could do for other players.
Yeah, I mean, I think he helps out everyone else so much. And just his ability to create for other players, it makes it so that it's just a lot easier, where you're not always having to create off the bounce. You're not always having to run different things to get guys open. It's just let him go create. And I think, whoever they draft at number 1 is going to be able to score by themselves. But I think at least allowing them to ease in where they can work off the ball, learn some of that, and then eventually they'll grow into the, handling the ball a little bit more. But at least having a guy that can handle that load immediately, where it's not directly onto Darren Peterson, directly onto AJ DeBonsa to be the dominant on-ball guy, I think is going to help them a lot. So I think he fits more with what they're doing now. Like we were talking about last segment, defensively, he's going to be an issue, but I think he helps you a lot just by giving you a true point guard, which this team's kind of lacked for a while.
Right. And you put yourself in a situation with the number 1 overall pick where you don't have to make the load overbearing on them early on in their career. The Wizards are kind of doing this in the reverse chronological order, maybe that some teams have done it, like Detroit, because they got Cade in 2021 after they finally got the first overall pick, and then they had a really tough string of bad lottery luck for a little while, where they kept getting 5 back-to-back seasons, and they got a couple of formidable players, Holland and Asar Thompson as well. But there was a lot of asked of Cade Cunningham early on in his career. Maybe it was for the betterment of him because he's morphed into the superstar that Detroit needs. But for a number 1 overall pick for Washington, you have some of the pieces you hope can be around your cornerstone long-term here already on the roster. So it makes a little bit more sense for where the Wizards, in order to complete this whole rebuild thing, make it make sense for what they've been trying to do, you have to find the guy that can morph into that. If you put him in a situation where he doesn't have to do it right away, I think it's going to better him long-term.
Yeah, plenty of interesting stuff going to happen with the Wizards this offseason, see what they can do going into next year. Last couple of minutes, though, I want to talk about Memorial Day. Do you usually celebrate a big cookout, or you do anything big for Memorial Day weekend generally, or no?
It kind of varies year to year. I'm not doing shoeys and Dewey. I can say that. Ryan Clary and Mike Marr drinking beers out of a shoe. That's disgusting. But I got a little bit of FOMO. I'd kind of like to do a shoey.
Max,
should I go do one when I get home?
Maybe. Max, I'm curious. Would you have done a shoey if you were in Dewey?
I would like to come on these airwaves and tell everybody that I'd be too good to indulge in a shoey. But I know for a fact that the moment would hit me and I would realize, when am I going to get to do this again? And I would absolutely do it.
Would you have done it out of Mike Maher's shoe?
I would have preferred mine. But if it was the only option, then, well, I would have had to do it.
The pressure, though, because if you don't do it in front of that crowd at the Starboard that's going crazy for you, it's tough.
Like, you can't leave people disappointed.
Right. When I did the Blazing Wings, when I did the Blazing Wings last week, had 100 people in the stream, I knew I had to finish because of that. Like, you can't let the people down.
What? Sure, you can let the people down. No problem at all.
No.
Just let the people down.
No.
What does it matter? Who cares?
No, you got to give people what they want. And if people wanted you and I, Toby, if we were at the Starboard, I think we'd be doing shoeys.
I don't think I'd be doing a shoey. You may do one yourself.
Toby'd be doing a shoey of tonic water.
Yeah. Well, aren't you going to shotgun like a soda or something? Is that something you have on the agenda for you?
Maybe. Last thing real quick. What does your ideal Memorial Day plate look like? What are you eating?
We're going to go a nice charcoal grilled burger.
Okay.
With cheddar cheese on it.
Yeah.
Lettuce, tomato, mayo.
Yeah.
We're going to have potato salad on the side.
I don't like potato salad.
You don't like potato salad? Come on, man.
Oh, come on, Toby.
Grow up. Corn on the cob, of course. Silly. A little bit of butter on it, some salt. And then for dessert, what should we go with for dessert? Yeah, let's go with brownies. I like a nice brownie.
Max, what's your plate look like?
Funnily enough, like usually around Memorial Day, when I was a kid, we would do crab feasts.
There you go.
So
silly.
yeah, just sitting down with a big cardboard sheet over the table and start cracking crabs.
That's what I ideally want. I have to hand over a little bit of cash to do it.
That sounds fantastic. I'm going burgers. I'll take a hot dog. Give me some ribs if possible.
You don't want 8 hot dogs?
I don't want 8 hot dogs. I don't. I'll take some baked beans as well. So I think that would be nice and good for a Memorial Day. You doing anything big, Max, for Memorial Day?
Yeah. I'm doing 10 to 2 with AWOD, and then I'm doing 3 to 5 with Denton over on Sirius XM. So it's a great day for your boy.
Yeah, a nice busy day of work for Max on Memorial Day. All right, that's going to do it for us here for the Junks. Tobi Altizer and Ben Strober. Max doing all the hard work behind the scenes, sitting in with the guys. Strobes, it's been fun, man.
It's been fun. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Strobes and Tobes will be back at a later date to be determined. All right, coming up next, AWOD right here on 106.7 The Fan. Keep it tuned right here. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day weekend.